o'clock. So we're expecting a few more folks, but it is 5 o'clock and I believe we have a quorum. Let me just double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Looks like we have 6. 1, 2, 6. We have 6 members here, which is what we need for a quorum. So we'll call the Transportation Commission meeting for July 26th, 2023 to order. And Stefan, if you'd please read the instructions.
All right. Welcome to our virtual meeting. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. Members of the commission, if you're able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you're able, please activate your video when you're speaking. In this meeting, panelists have the ability to mute and unmute themselves. Please use the raise hand feature when you're asked to when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. Staff, please use the raise hand feature when you're asked a question. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. Staff will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the commission, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Chair Kovich, floor is yours.
Thanks, Stefan. Aiden, if you'd call a roll, please.
Great. So we got Juliana Bennett. I don't see MGR Govindarajan.
I don't see him either. Do you?
No. Dina Nina Martinez Rutherford.
Here.
Barbara Harrington McKinney is excused. Ann Kovich.
Here.
Robbie Weber.
Here.
Denise Jess will be arriving later around 6. Pepe Barros.
Here.
Darren Wozniewski will be arriving later. Chris McCahill.
Here.
Nikki Vandermeulen. And Bill Bremer. Bill, we didn't hear you, but we see you.
We see you, Bill. Can you hear us, Bill?
You hear me now?
Yeah, you're a little quiet, but we can. Try again.
Get louder. Thanks. I'm here.
Okay. Okay. And Harold Kleems was just appointed to the Transportation Commission last night, but he's traveling, so he's excused today. And Eric Finch is a new Assistant City Attorney. And there's Eric. You want to wave to everybody?
Hey, everybody.
And we have a young member with us tonight too.
This is Rosie.
Hi, Rosie. Can you say hi? Great. Sorry, I can't resist. So anyway, Steve Brist is retiring. So Eric is going to be the Assistant City Attorney who's assigned to Metro Transit and to us for transportation issues. So, and Bill, since we have a couple of people who are missing tonight, both you and Nikki would be able to vote. Okay. All right. Did everybody have a chance to look at the minutes from the last meeting? There was a second version that Aiden sent out tonight once he had an opportunity to research some folks who had left the meeting in terms of the timing. Everybody have a chance to look at those? Bill?
I'll make a motion for approval of the minutes as amended.
Okay. There's a motion. Pepe, is that a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Well, I assume your hand is still up from the motion. Stefan, could you make me a
Yes.
so that I can put hands down, because sometimes I need to do that. Thank you for making me a co-host. I was searching for the right word there. Okay, any further discussion? Okay, we'll assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain. If so, please raise your hand. Okay. Next we have public comment for items not on the agenda. And Stefan, I believe you said that we have somebody who's registered under item 1.
We do, but I do not see anyone present in our attendees panel.
Aiden, you have somebody there?
Somebody's registered, but I don't see them on the attendance
Okay.
list. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't see them in there either. Okay, all right. Well, we can maybe circle back if we see somebody come in later. How about disclosures or recusals this evening? Anybody have any disclosures or recusals? Okay. Next, we move on to the consent agenda. We just have one item proposed for the consent agenda. Robbie?
I actually just had a question about that item, pretty quick. But if somebody from staff can answer it, that'd be great.
Sure. Why don't you go ahead with your question?
Why is this being vacated, and what's the plan for the lots that are shown there that will no longer have frontage, or are they going to front on, now I've forgotten what the main road is there. I guess, is there a change in the land use that is going to necessitate vacating this? So,
Jeff, are you going to answer that for us?
Yeah.
Great, thanks.
What they're doing is they're reconfiguring and replatting that area. And so there's already a conditionally approved plat redoing the lots. And so in order to do that, we have to vacate the existing roads, and then they'll be immediately replatted upon. What we'll do is we hold off on recording the vacation until the new plat is readied and going to be recorded and eminent that it's going to be recorded. And then we'll record the vacation, and then they'll turn around and record the new plat and create the new lots and the new streets.
okay, same land use.
Single family. Yep.
Okay, just wanted to know, long ago, there was a suggested vacation that would have made a very long block, and I just like to know what the plan is while we're vacating the public right of way. But thank you.
Okay, we would need a motion on item number 2. Robbie?
Move approval.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second? Alder Martinez Rutherford? Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Put Jeff's hand down there. Any further discussion? Okay, I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain. If so, please raise your hand. Okay, thanks. So we will move on to item number 3, directing staff to take the steps necessary to conduct an experimental closure of the 400 to 600 blocks of State Street, including notification of directly impacted stakeholders. Dan, Dan's going to handle that for us. Go ahead.
Yeah, so my name is Dan McAuliffe. I'm with the Planning Division. I'm also staff to the Downtown Coordinating Committee. So this resolution follows the work of the DCC, and they've been exploring some ideas over the past several months about the potential of that could occur on State Street in the 400, 600 block now that Metro Transit is no longer utilizing those spaces. So the resolution essentially directs staff to come up with a plan for a partial closure of the 400 to 600 blocks of State Street for the purposes of pedestrian malls starting in 2024. So a couple things just to keep in mind: it's not planning a reconstruction. The street is in good physical condition, and no physical changes to the street are anticipated. So the items that we'll really be focusing on are access control, street furniture, and placemaking and space activation. The DCC facilitated conversations with several agencies over the course of their exploration to kind of understand what is possible and what isn't. A couple kind of guardrails that we know going in. We need to maintain emergency access and fire lane of 20 feet. So there's very limited opportunities of change that can occur between the curbs. So there's no cafe spaces, no kiosks, no food carts, et cetera, in those areas. We've talked with Renee Calloway, the city's pedestrian bike coordinator, about the importance of maintaining it as a bike corridor, as well as pedestrian safety and upward issues. We've had conversations with the city's disability rights specialist, talking about the needs of accessibility for individuals with mobility limitations. We've also had a lot of conversation with the business community about the needs to maintain delivery. So our next steps for fall, if the resolution passes, is kind of coordinate with various agencies to come up with a draft plan. So right now, we don't have a plan. It's just kind of some direction for the city staff to kind of go and pursue this. We will likely coordinate a draft and take feedback through a public meeting, finalize that plan, again, with input from staff, acquire any furniture, fixtures, or anything else we need, coordinating placemaking or public art efforts, and then engage in a proactive communication effort to ensure that business owners and residents on the street understand what's coming well in advance to prepare. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions the commission has.
Alder Martinez Rutherford, go ahead.
Yes, I'm curious. I saw that it said large expenditures are identified, and I'm just curious because I didn't see it in any of the material accompanying, if you kind of know what that fiscal impact looks like.
So we don't know what the fiscal impact would be because we haven't started to design the space. I don't anticipate the fiscal impact to be very significant because we are not anticipating a reconstruction. The street is in very good shape. We are not talking about, changing the curb or anything like that. Long term, there may be, possibly wanting to explore maybe some curb extensions or mid-block race crossings. But in the short term, I think it's really going to be focused on low cost implementation things like furniture, possibly planters, some others, things like that.
Other comments or questions? Chris, go ahead.
Thanks. So I guess a question about the item on the agenda. The purpose of the item is to move forward with exploring or, conducting this pilot. I guess I'm curious what the process looks like, when we would see this again, if we would see this again.
That's certainly a great question. I think that wasn't spelled out in the resolution, but I think a revisiting with TC with a draft plan after some public engagement would be appropriate. And I'm happy to bring it back once it's kind of finalized for review.
Thanks. That's what I'm getting at. I think because there's, this came, was it last summer or the summer before? And there was a lot of important points raised about accessibility and stuff. So I think we would want to do that again. And I really don't see anything in here about maintaining bicycle access or anything. So I think we just want to talk through all that stuff at some point.
Yep, absolutely. And we are going to definitely coordinate with staff and understand, have those conversations. But we certainly understand wanting to kind of dot the I's and cross the T's, make sure that.
Yeah. No, you're right, Chris. Last time this was here where we were talking about closing State Street temporarily, there was an extensive discussion with traffic engineering, with fire, with everybody, and with the Department of the folks with regard to people with disabilities, ped bike, everything. So, Robbie, go ahead. Can't hear you right now.
No,
There you go.
I was looking at some documents and I had to get back to the Zoom screen.
Sure.
So maybe I missed this in some of the materials, but I was looking at the questions about ADA access, and they said, and there was a question about access to each door and, whether there would be an accessible sidewalk and that kind of thing. And then there was also an issue or a mention about transitioning pedestrians in the 1 to 300 block from the sidewalk to the middle of the street. So is the idea that the area immediately adjacent to each business would be occupied by, say, tables or displays or something else that would make the existing sidewalk not ADA accessible? And would then people be walking down the middle of the street? And I guess I have the same questions maybe that Chris does about, I thought that the middle was kind of the people moving faster than pedestrian speed. I know there's a lot of skateboards there, for better or worse. Obviously a lot of bicyclists. So I'm trying to figure out, is the idea to put commercial uses immediately adjacent to the building so that those sidewalks would no longer be ADA accessible?
No, so I think that was certainly something that was brought up during the DCC. And while they didn't necessarily take they didn't make a motion kind of saying that the sidewalk would be preserved, I don't see an avenue where the immediate pedestrian path adjacent to the building is interrupted. It just serves too valuable of a purpose for businesses having, customers, for ADA access to those businesses. I just don't see a different route that we would go. So I fully anticipate that pedestrian corridor being maintained.
Okay. I was just a little confused because there was another question about people moving from the sidewalks to the middle of the street.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, why would they do that if, sure, it's great if they can go ahead and walk in the street if they want to, but there's no reason they have to. So.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I think, Robbie, I think there was a document that showed one option where the movement would be in the street and another where it would stay on the sidewalk. So I think, weren't both options discussed at one point, Dan?
So those are graphics that were prepared to illustrate potential outcomes, but not necessarily. I mean, they were usually kind of like identify and troubleshoot problems. So they kind of showed that, if you put cafe spaces all the way up to the buildings, you're going to have issues with ADA access because you're going to have a ramp, multiple ramps throughout the block to every door and create a path to every door.
Okay.
And so I think that we use that to basically eliminate the possibility of having cafe spaces.
Okay. I admit there were a lot of attachments to all the items, and I did not get through all of them on this.
Yeah.
I would also, I guess, this doesn't necessarily have a transportation issue, but people being able to window shop next to the building is a pretty valuable business amenity. So I would assume that they would want people to walk next to their buildings. But
yep. And we absolutely heard that when we had our conversations with GSBA representatives and the bid. So obviously different businesses have different perspectives and no two businesses are alike, but I think that, one of the things we have to try to figure out is that balance between retail, service, entertainment businesses on the street, and the ability to get deliveries in. And a lot of retail businesses are actually having deliveries go out for e-commerce. So,
yeah. Okay. Thanks.
If nobody else I did have one question. One of the things that I'd be interested in hearing about down the road is the concern that's expressed about how pedestrians, bicycles, skateboarders, such as Robbie mentioned, how those all would intermix in this pedestrian mall, and how would we ensure safety, particularly for those most vulnerable users, if we have those kinds of situations where people zoom by?
That is a great question, and I think it's one of the things that we're really looking forward to digging into. One of the things that kind of in the back of my mind is you think about the speed limit. That's certainly something. Bikes are also supposed to follow the posted speed limit, which is 15 right now. We certainly know that certain cyclists exceed that on timing on occasion. But there was a lot of discussion in DCC how the upper blocks of State Street, where sometimes pedestrians intermingle in the curb, in the roadway, is different from kind of the Library Mall, the 700 block, where it's less programmed, speeds slow down, there's no curbs. And maybe part of the solution is providing those visual cues to users that it's okay to be in the street and it is a shared space, that on an occasional, maybe a delivery truck is there, but then also it is there for bikes and pedestrians as well.
Okay. Chris, go ahead.
Just wanted to reflect on that for a second. I know we're still in the early stages of figuring this out, but the other thing I'm thinking about is when State Street gets closed now for events, it's basically the barricades go up curb to curb. And I think folks are asked to walk their bikes. And some do, but many don't. Many go slow. And I think the idea that we are going to ask folks to dismount or sort of do a wink and a nod, like we know you're not going to, but please do, is not a sustainable solution, you know, to this design moving forward. We need to figure out how to accommodate through movement in this pedestrianized space. So that would be something that I'd be looking for as we get closer to an actual plan.
Okay.
Go ahead, Renee. I see you clicked on.
Sure. And, I think, we brought some of these issues up. And I think some of the things, at events, they don't always get the barriers quite right. And I think, we tried to be clear that walking your bike, that's not a long-term solution. And that this sometimes is an issue with pedestrian malls where they want to push bikes out, but we don't have some other corridor that is parallel to State Street somehow. So I think, the pilot, this is really trying to figure out like, how can this all exist together? And already, if you go down there, there's a lot of skateboarders. If you've been down there recently, people are more likely to kind of just walk wherever in the street. So there is some of that happening organically. And it's how do we make that work best in the long run?
Yep. And safest too. Pepe, go ahead.
Sure, thanks, Anne. Well, I apologize in advance if this is something that has been answered in the past, but it's the first time that I'm in this meeting, and before just checking the agenda, it's the first time I'm seeing this. I understand, Dan, that this is you're looking for approval for piloting some ideas, right? So this is not the final project?
Yes. So the ask of Transportation Commission is, should the city pursue developing a design for it? It's not the design of a pilot. It's just, should we keep going as staff?
Should we go on? Okay. And the main objective of this project is it to benefit businesses in State Street?
So I think as a city, we always try to take advantage of our public spaces and make them as inviting as possible for all of our residents, our businesses, and our visitors. State Street has historically been a semi-pedestrian mall. We've had transit on the 1 to 600 blocks up until this past June, when the Metro Transit, the redesign, moved buses off the lower 3 blocks. So we're kind of looking at that space as, if we don't have that additional volume on the street, what can we do to make those places just a nicer public space?
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So then this is something that would potentially impact the rest of State Street, or is it intended to be only within those blocks?
Just the 4, 5, and 600 blocks.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Other comments or questions? Chris, go ahead.
I can make a motion.
Okay, right. Go ahead. Sure.
So I move that we recommend staff move forward with the pilot on the condition that the plans come back to Transportation Commission.
I second.
Okay, there's a motion that the staff move forward with the plans for the pilot. Well, I would say move forward with the pilot as long as the plans come back to TC. Did I get that right, Chris?
Yes.
Discussion. Chris, did you want to speak to your motion?
I'll just speak real quick. Yeah,
Sure.
I'm excited about figuring out what we can do. There's a lot of challenges that it'll be interesting to work through, but could be a really great project.
Okay. Further discussion. Okay, seeing no hands, I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain. If so, please raise your hand. Okay, thanks very much, Dan, and we'll look forward to seeing you back again.
Thank you. See you next time.
Okay. All right, thanks. Okay, we'll move on to item number 4, North Stoughton Road options. Tom.
Yeah, thanks, Ann. This is the Wisconsin DOT month, right? So
It
at
is.
our last meeting, I presented a set of staff comments regarding alternatives for the interstate study, which are being transmitted under a transmittal memo from the mayor, so that when they kind of preview their preferred alternative, at least where our comments are incorporated in the mix of input that they're getting from the like. I'm going to say they are also on a concurrent time frame doing the Stoughton Road project, and it's a pretty big project, and it's as impactful as the interstate, probably more so because it's going through the heart of our city. They've broken the North Stoughton Road into two sections: the north section, which is from Highway 30 to the north, and then the south section, which is from Highway 30 south to just below the belt line. The south section is on a slightly slower time frame, so we don't have to get our ducks in a row as quickly. We do have, so I'm going to go through a staff memo that we prepared. It's been reviewed by the mayor. Probably will accept your comments, put your comments at the end of the memo, and then we'll transmit it to the DOT. And I also just want to note that the project manager, Jeff Behrens from the DOT, as well as the supervisor, Dan Shave, are here. I'm going to present this from Madison's point of view, right? But I just want you to know that we do have them available. So I'm just going to get all my stuff in line. Okay. So, oh goodness, I'm sorry. I got everything in line and then I lost it all. So just to start, to know that it exists, I put this into Legistar. On Monday, there was two updates that were relatively minor, didn't change the substance of it, but did change the wording of some of it. So you're welcome to pull this memo right off of Legistar. This is the memo that we will be transmitting to the DOT with your comments. To discuss it, I put a lot of the graphics into a PowerPoint because I feel like just visually it's easier. And so that's what I'll talk from. North Stoughton Road study, Wisconsin DOT is preparing an environmental document. Probably will be released spring or summer of 2024. This says the preferred alternative in the fall of 24, and that's not quite true. I'm going to say that's screened alternatives in the fall of 23. It will go before the Transportation Projects Commission. That's a state commission for funding in the fall of 24. They would like to narrow alternatives for meetings that they're planning in September and October, and they're collecting comments. For Madison, we have several key interests. We are interested in the intersections north of East Washington Avenue. The East Washington Avenue Stoughton Road intersection is of substantial concern to us. The Lexington commercial intersection also is key to us. For those of you who are not as familiar with the east side, that's kind of the intersection that goes into the Walmart area. And then pedestrian bicycling. These are the intersections that we are providing comments regarding. I'm not going to go into it as much. We do have an interest in maintaining full access at Hepker Road because it provides. It could be a potential interchange, but it then also provides access to Sun Prairie. Hanson Road is quite important for the UW Health and the American Center, so we would like full access there as well as our bus terminal. And then we have specific recommendations for these other intersections. One that is of particular concern to us is we would like to maintain at least cross access at Anderson Road because that's where our bus rapid transit route is. I'm not going to go too much into that because something that's perhaps bigger is perhaps the East Washington Stoughton Road intersection. So the East Washington Stoughton Road intersection is this right here. Recently, the Planning Division kind of finished the Hawthorne Truax plan, and they have quite a few, what do I want to call it, recommendations, from that plan regarding this intersection. I highlighted a series of them. The design should be human-scaled urban connection that minimizes pedestrian crossing distances. The intersection should be comfortable, safe, and convenient for bikes and pedestrians. The design should not further divide communities. We'd like to maintain local street connections to the extent possible. And then the design should support existing and future redevelopment. So those are key considerations. I think in particular, East Washington Avenue is very important to us because we just, the city of Madison just put in transit-oriented design overlay. So we, on East Washington Avenue, we are asking for it to be more dense, to be more oriented towards walking and transit so that we can provide more amenities along there. It's kind of a way, our solution to our transportation problems is to put our amenities and our people near transit where they can take buses, right? And so it's really important for us that the urban character of East Washington kind of remain. We developed a series of screening questions, and that this is this is in the memo. Does the concept provide a human-scaled urban connection? Does the concept provide an urban connection that provides comfortable, safe, and convenient pedestrian bicycle connections? This includes, minimizing the crossing distances, providing direct, easy to follow pedestrian paths, provide direct, easy to follow bicycle paths. Does the concept minimize the loss of access on East Washington Avenue? Does it minimize the loss of business and residential access? And then how does it affect businesses, both existing and future, kind of through relocations or enhancing future? So I believe I just want to check Alder Martinez Rutherford. This is not quite in your district, is it? Is this intersection in your district, or is it in Alder Fields district?
I think Alder Field is on too, Tom.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yep, that'd be me on one side.
Okay. Good. So this is good.
I believe it's Alder Latimer Burris on the other.
So we should try and get with her as well. But I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad Alder Field is here. So the first one is just a traditional signalized intersection. It looks like there's a lot of lanes here, but when you count it up, it's roughly about the same number of lanes on the approaches. Some approaches have more lanes, one more lane, and some approaches have one fewer lanes, right? The islands could be maybe changed to reduce the crossing distances, but this is an at-grade intersection. This intersection actually becomes pretty feasible if, for instance, the DOT were to implement some of those I-94 interchange options at the 151 interchange, right? If you remember from our last meeting, several of the alternatives took a fair amount of traffic away from this intersection. And so if one of those, I think it was alternative 3, 4, and 5 were implemented, it would take quite a bit of traffic out of this intersection, and that graded intersection would be fully appropriate. This is very large intersection, but if you look at the bike routing is pretty traditional. You know, bikes would go straight east-west on bicycle connections. We probably would ask that all ages and abilities type of facility could be provided. If you are trying to cross this, a pedestrian, they do have to use islands, but it's a little bit more straightforward. Okay. If we go to the second one, this is called a quadrant intersection. Okay, and so what a quadrant intersection does is it takes all the left turning vehicles out of the main intersection and relocates them, right? So instead of making a left turn here, let's say if I'm going westbound and instead of making a left turn here, I would make a left turn here. Okay. Similarly, let's say if I'm coming southbound and instead of making a left turn here, or that would be a left turn here, I would make a left turn here and go around. Okay. And this seems like it's a little bit indirect, but it is used in other parts of the nation, and it's kind of a nice way to get more capacity out of an intersection without doing a grade separation. If you look, you know, the crossing distances are, the number of lanes that you have to cross are quite a bit fewer at this intersection. It does introduce one more intersection rate, signalized intersection right here. Probably the distance could be minimized by, you know, reducing the islands, and that would be a kind of a design detail. This is an example of one. This is in North Carolina. I try, within my memo, I put a couple of links to locations so you could view examples of them. I think the links work in the Adobe Acrobat file. So that's something, but this is one. And so here you can see, typically in a quadrant intersection, you can develop, you know, the interior. It's just that the left turns are relocated. Okay. So those are the only two at grade solutions that are being considered by the Wisconsin DOT. All the others involve some type of grade separation. So automatically, whenever you have a grade separation or a bridge, right, then you're kind of changing the scale of the improvement, right? So something has to go up, you know, driveways have to be removed. And so it just, it changes the scale of it. It doesn't necessarily mean that's bad, but it just is what it is, right? Their third alternative is either it could be called a partial jug handle or a echelon interchange. And this is where, let's say, very much like the quadrant intersection, if I was going southbound and I wanted to go eastbound on East Washington, I would go southbound, take a right, okay, and then take another right. Notice that in this particular intersection, I go over East Washington. We have one of these in the city. It's over on Junction Road, and it's almost the exact same design. So here you can see what it looks like, and if you live on the west side or you care to drive to the west side, you can experience this, right? So at first glance, it does seem like it's a rather large improvement, and so that's probably initially staff were a little bit cautious about this, thinking, oh, do we want something this big? But when you start looking at some of the criteria that we're looking at, the east-west pedestrian movements, because the southbound traffic is grade separated, the east-west pedestrian movements only have to cross 2 lanes right here rather than, you know, 7 or 8 lanes. Similarly, on this side, the east-west movements only have to cross, you know, 2 lanes and then another 2 lanes. So it's a you think, well, that's a better condition, right? The north-south pedestrian movements would be pretty much as they are today. They do not get better, but they don't necessarily get worse. The north-south pedestrian movements here, you'd actually be grade separated. So you would be grade separated here, but then we would request, that a pedestrian bridge would bring the pedestrians or cyclists down to grade, just like they do at Junction Road. One of the things that we've asked, this was Jim Wolf's, is that type of grade separation creates indirection, and maybe to combat that, could there be a pedestrian crossing considered the west leg of the jug handle? The fourth concept that they're considering is a single point interchange, partially because staff sometimes gave an indication that perhaps this would be better than a tight diamond. However, there are some concerns with this. We do have a single point interchange in Madison. Let me get it. It's right here. It's very efficient for traffic. Instead of having 2 intersections, there's one intersection for motor vehicles. However, it's very difficult for pedestrians. So I'll go to here. A pedestrian that's going east-west on East Washington, they have to cross a slip lane, cross another lane, cross another lane, cross another set of lanes, right? That's the good direction. In the harder direction, which typically is this right here, it almost always has to have a grade separated crossing, because there is always turning movements going on. And so there's never really a gap in the traffic where a pedestrian can cross. So for the Verona Road single point interchange, they put in a tunnel. And it's a rather long tunnel, but that's the only way a pedestrian that's over here can go here. They would not be able to do it here. There isn't a tunnel on the north side, and similarly on their proposal, that they don't have a tunnel or an overpass on the west side. Things to consider with this is that these red X's mean that those are driveway closures, and they are also ramps. So probably the access associated with Walgreens and the properties to the north probably would have to be removed, right? The blue dots represent potential driveway closures, which means that policy would dictate that they would have to be closed, but the geometry or the grade differential doesn't necessarily mandate that they would have to be closed. The memo, the staff were expressing reservations about this because we just feel like it's not the best, it's not the most intuitive for a pedestrian, let's say, that might have we're just talking about all ages and abilities, right? Would you send your child who's 11 years old out? Could they navigate this? If you had some type of impairment or visual impairment, would you be able to figure out how to get through this? Because this is a important interchange. We are on the corner of Fair Oaks in East Washington, which is just a block away. We're building a relatively large residential development right there, right? And so we want this area to redevelop, support more density, which means all types of people, which means children, it means seniors, it means people with all types of abilities, right? So moving on, the DOT, I'm going to say for their part, they did get creative. They looked at a lot of different things. This is a one, and you look at this and you go, oh, well, isn't that interesting? You know, that's kind of an interesting. The difference with this is that functionally, well, this is an example of one of these right here, except that instead of the roundabout being below, the roundabout is above. But this is an example of one. I think I put a link to this in the memo. However, functionally, this ends up being just a diamond interchange with roundabout terminals. You know, it's just how do you want the roundabout terminals to work? But functionally, it ends up being just like this. And so this is actually the Highway N interchange in Cottage Grove. Okay, and so that's essentially what's happening with this one. The problem is that instead of the dominant direction being the north-south direction, right, on Stoughton Road, the dominant direction or the free-flowing direction is on East Washington, which is maybe not what we would want. Because these are ramps right here, you know, all of this driveways, you know, you just can't have driveways on ramps. You know, you just don't put driveways on freeway ramps. And so these become relocations, but not only do they become relocations, these properties, we're not able to redevelop these properties, right? Because they don't have access. If you don't have a driveway, you don't have access. So then this becomes a vacant piece of land, you know, on a street that we feel is pretty important for us as far as filling up with people and businesses and stuff. One other factor is that all of the Stoughton Road traffic, which in this area seems to have 60,000 vehicles per day, according to the site I was looking at, pedestrians would have to cross. Right now, pedestrians have to cross that 60,000 vehicles per day, but they have a signal that helps them cross. You know what I mean? It's not comfortable, but they have a signal. With a roundabout, they'd have to find gaps, right? They'd have to find gaps, and that would be difficult in the east-west direction, right? It's easy to find gaps in the north-south direction because it's just the turning movements that you have, but the east-west direction. And so, you know, to put it, this is where a pedestrian would have to cross right here, you know, on this example, and that's 60,000. So that's a lot. And so we're not really recommending this one. But that being said, I don't want to, you know, the DOT came up with some creative designs, or you might say, or something, and they're worth looking at it. If we look, concepts 6 and concept 7 are essentially the same. They're just treating things differently. So I think I'm going to describe concept 7 first, and then go back to concept 6. Okay. We could not find, there's no links to concept 6 or 7 because we could not find other examples in the United States where this will work or where they exist. What this does is it takes turning and movements off both the northbound and the east-westbound streets and brings them up to a couplet, right? And so these are little signals, right? These are little signals, and they would be snappy signals, like 40-second cycles, right? So you come up, you get a green, and then you make your turning movement, right? So I would take this ramp, get a green, take my turning movement, go that way. Similarly, come up, get a green, take my left. So this would be very snappy. For pedestrians, it would actually be kind of good. You know, these are just traditional intersections for a pedestrian. They would actually have to cross probably only a quarter or less of the traffic volume because they're only crossing turning movement volume. So they're not crossing the through movement volume. So it's really kind of innovative. One thing that's of concern to us is that this is almost like having an interchange in two directions, in that on East Washington, you see these ramps, off ramps, to do your turning movements and on ramps, but you also have those on Stoughton Road, on and off ramps, right? So that means that there's a signal in the middle to control through movements on East Washington and Stoughton Road. Okay, so this is just causing us a little bit of pause, because that means that I'm traveling on Stoughton Road and I see an off ramp or whatever, and I think I'm on a freeway, and lo and behold, I get below, there's a stoplight, right? That's kind of non-typical. Like, you don't see that anywhere, really. If I'm on East Washington, I go by a freeway off ramp, I keep going, and I have a signal. That's the visual cue is going to make you think you're on a freeway, but you're not on a freeway, and you have a stoplight right here. And so we don't know how that would function. This is a very creative design, but it's not traditional. We couldn't find another example. This does, because we have freeway on and off ramps in all four quadrants, it really takes away all the access points and all the quadrants. So if you see what I'm saying, so that means that these properties really can't be developed. And the removal of access is not necessarily just a policy thing with Wisconsin DOT. I mean, because we have ramps, you physically would not be able, to have a driveway on that, because of the grade differential. So based on that, I think our memo says.
Excuse me, Tom, did you want to go back and do 6? Did you do 6?
Oh, yeah. All right. So 6 is the exact same thing. Is the exact same thing, except instead of using a couplet of signals on the top, it uses roundabouts. Okay. I think we probably prefer 7 to 6 because, roundabouts they're more difficult to navigate, as a pedestrian, or let's say someone who might have visual challenges. So if we're going to do something like this, I think we would prefer 7 over 6. 6 says it's the exact same alternative. It just uses a roundabout instead of a set of signals. So can everyone see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So on that, our staff memo recommends maybe moving forward with 1, 2, and 3. If you look at the way we kind of, scored them, these maybe are a little bit subjective. Maybe 7. It's kind of it's an intriguing concept, but it's non-traditional, and I don't know if we could find another one. So I'm actually, if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind pausing. We have more to discuss, but I wouldn't mind pausing, and I would like to hear questions, and then I'd also like to hear what others on the commission think about this. I know Bill Bremer has been looking at interchanges for 40 years of his life. Chris does a lot of transportation, so just questions or comments.
And Chris, I think you've been sitting in on the meetings on this, haven't you? Yeah. Aiden, let me ask, is there anybody registered on this item?
Nope, there isn't.
Oh, okay, so we're good. We can pause whenever you'd like, Tom. So go ahead and pause. So comments or questions? Let's see. Bill, go ahead.
Thanks, Ann and Tom. I wouldn't, just because I've looked at these doesn't necessarily mean I have any insight that's better than anybody else's. When I looked at this, I looked at the designs, and I before I looked at your chart here, I had thought that 2 and 3 were my preferred thoughts about going forward for further study. 7 is like you say, is interesting. I've never seen anything like that before, but it's not to say it couldn't be tried. But I think overall, I think it really needs evaluation from the folks that of pedestrian and bicycles to see which they think would be perhaps maybe more pedestrian bicycle friendly. But I guess 1 is just kind of like what we already have, and I just don't see that as really that bicycle friendly. So, but so I think you did a good job of explaining it and evaluating the different, like the spewies and so forth. I just don't think this is a appropriate place for that design. So, I agree completely with what your chart, particularly the ones with lots of red.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Robbie, go ahead. There's a hand up in the, Stefan, who's in the attendees there?
Yeah. It's like Kyle, which I believe, yes, that's probably Kyle Herman.
Was he the person who registered on item 1?
Item 1, yes. Yep.
Okay. Well, Kyle, we didn't see you there during item 1, so if we can finish item 4, then we can go to your separate comments and go back for item 1. Okay. So Robbie, go ahead.
Yeah. So, man, I was kind of overwhelmed by the alternatives here, but I think that I came away thinking that 2 and 3 are the best options. I do want to point out just, 1 or 2 things which might influence our decision if we actually get, if the city gets as much say as we'd like to have. And that is that, first of all, I went to the first meeting or the neighborhood meeting last week for the next section of Stoughton Road south of here.
Yeah.
And I was very pleased to see that they did present an urban boulevard option. And the survey gave the alternative. They asked what the maximum speed limit should be on that section. And one of the options on the survey was 35 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So I think they have heard that the city's plan, say 15 years ago, was to prefer to turn this into an urban boulevard. And I think we should keep that in mind as we look at this area as well, because, I think there is an incredible amount of redevelopment potential along this entire corridor, especially to the south. But this is a really critical intersection. And although I think my second point is, although if you go through this intersection, especially driving, what you see are some low density commercial uses. Behind those low density commercial uses are residential areas. And I think we really have to make it as comfortable and easy as possible for people who live on any of those 4 sides, because the 4th side, where there's not a lot of residential, is where MATC is. And that's a big destination. And I think we need to make it as comfortable and logical as possible to get through this intersection by pedestrian and bicycle means, and transit, because of course, transit users are all pedestrians.
Yeah.
So I definitely support the emphasis on making these as user friendly for people not using cars as possible, because I think we have a potential here for this intersection. And the last thing we want is to turn it into another interchange, which would just be a real waste of land and redevelopment potential. And also, of course, it would just encourage people to drive more instead of just walking literally across the street to get to their destinations. So I just wanted to throw that in, that there is a lot of residential very close by, and that the South Stoughton Road, the next section down, DOT is at least discussing an urban boulevard cross section, and I think we need to prepare for that if possible. So thank you.
Thanks, Robbie. Alder Martinez Rutherford, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess what I'm thinking is about the impact of the people in the area, and the fewer driveways we have to take out, the better for the people of that area. The only one that I'm really seeing that kind of seems to not do that is concept 3. But I'm also thinking about it, how it impacts a business owner who just moved into that building there, and is somebody who kind of needs a hand helping get their business continuing. So I guess those are my two concerns with almost any of these proposals. But I guess if I would lean towards 3, just because it seems to impact fewer residents that are on East Washington. So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah. Some ways.
Did you have an answer with regard to that? Tom, did you have comments with regard to?
Yeah, I'm going to say that alternative 3, it does impact one quadrant, but then the rest of the quadrants kind of get to be the way they are. You know what I mean? Which it's kind of a thing. But I agree.
So Tom, I noticed that with alternative 3, there was the potential that Walgreens might have to relocate, which was one of the disadvantages you mentioned.
Well, they show.
It mentions that under 3, but that's just a possibility as opposed to something that would absolutely have to happen, because there's not the issue that you described with the ramps, correct?
I kind of challenged that, I think, in the memo, or I meant to challenge that southbound will be going up, right? And so there will be a grade differential, but northbound will be at grade, right? And so I don't quite understand why, if northbound is at grade, those driveways have to be removed. You see what I'm saying? So.
Sure. So that's more a possibility and something that might be able to be addressed.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
So maybe I was double thinking that.
Sure. Alder Field, go ahead.
Thank you so much. So I wanted to echo some of the concepts, values mentioned by the last 2 speakers, and thank Tom for putting together this chart comparison of some of the alternatives per these goals of the city. I agree with the majority of these. None of the alternatives look quite perfect. I was at the local elected officials meeting where these were previewed a couple of weeks ago, and my biggest piece of feedback globally for each of these was that we do need to prioritize pedestrian crossings in this area to avoid further disconnecting some of these neighborhoods from each other. So some of the grade separated intersections or interchanges are the ones that I'm very much least interested in seeing happen. And so there are 2 kind of uses or types of crossings that I want to talk about that I'm most interested in making sure we're not requiring people to go up uncomfortable spiral ramps over the highway. So my constituents are the Mayfair Park neighborhood, which is in the southeast quadrant of this intersection, who will soon benefit from a major city investment in the northeast quadrant of this intersection, the Rindle Park Imagination Center. So they'll be crossing quite a bit there to get over to the new library and culture center and the parks facility that's going to go up at that site. And they're very excited about it. the neighborhood's been looking forward to it for a few years, and their ability to get there will be contingent on how readily pedestrians and bikes can cross East Washington at this location. The other significant use that I don't think we can lose track of is the fact that the city's shelter, primarily for men who are unhoused, is going to go in the northeast quadrant of this area. And one of the nearest service businesses nearby is the Nakusa Trail Walmart, where many of them who are in this area now depend upon their access to that Walmart. And so they will also be crossing on the east side of Stoughton Road across East Washington Avenue. And so I'm very interested in making sure that we can retain as comfortable of a pedestrian crossing across East Washington Avenue at grade as possible in this area. Based on those, I'm most interested in seeing 1, 2, or 3, but primarily 3 happen. I appreciate the chance for input, and I'm looking forward to seeing more details about those public information meetings in September or October about these to hear from some of the residents. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Tom, did you have any comments before we move on?
No, but I think 2 other people.
Yeah, they do. I just, no, before we moved on to the next speaker, if you had any comments with regard to what Alder Field said.
No, if you see me looking down, I'm actually writing stuff down on my notebook so that I can put a little summary at the end of this memo. So.
Great, thanks. Alder Figueroa Cole, go ahead.
Thank you. So I was multitasking while I'm listening to this meeting. So I heard something about this being submitted for a study. So can that be redefined for me? Is this like, are we trying to define one to make a study of, or are these the plans on what is going to happen at East Washington?
Yep. I think the way this will probably work is that eventually, the winter or spring, the Wisconsin DOT will make a preferred alternative, and we will make probably an official comment on their preferred alternative. Maybe that will be a council action or something like that. But currently they're in the process of saying, all right, we're going to study 3 or 4 of these more, right? And so I think what we wanted to do is we didn't want our favorites to get kicked out, right? So they are going to get, they're going to narrow this to 3 or 4 more alternatives for study prior to the meeting. And I'm going to invite either Dan Shave or Jeff Behrens just to confirm if I'm saying this correctly.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Yeah, Tom, you're correct. Right now, we've got the 7 options that you ran through. And ideally, before we take these to the public, because it is a lot to process, if possible, we would like to knock that down. I think probably to 4 or 5 potentially is what we'd be looking for. So we appreciate the feedback that we're getting.
Okay, thank you. So then this, again, I just wanted to kind of center into, this is not technically a city project. The DOT is asking for input, and at the end of the day, you guys make the determination and you also do the community outreach. Is that what I kind of heard from what you just said there?
Yes, yes, Figueroa Cole. This is their project, but it impacts us a lot.
No, I get it, but I just want to know, like at the end of the day, if they end up choosing 1, 2, 3, or whatever, at the end of the day will be their choice based on community input, and they're asking for our input, but I just want to make sure that the council is not going to decide 1, 2, or 3, the DOT will, right?
Yeah, the DOT will, but we hope that they give us.
Yeah, I get it.
Strong
I understand.
We can put up roadblocks and all sorts of things. We want our voice to be heard, right? So.
I absolutely agree, but I just also setting the stage for people that may be listening to this meeting or will listen to this meeting that you know what the lines are. Like we'll scream and yell for what we think is best, but at the end of the day, we'll work in collaboration, but we're not running this particular project.
Yeah, I might, Jeff and they might be think I'm overstepping, but I'm going to say, unlike, unlike the interstate project, where really, if they expand their freeway from 4 to 5 lanes, we can tell them, oh, we don't like that or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's their facility. This, while it's technically their facility, it's right in the heart of our city. It's like right, and I think I believe, that they want our input, and I think they want to. I think we have a little bit more influence just because it's a different kind of facility. It's right in the heart of our city, and I believe WisDOT has sought to be to listen to us. Right?
Yep. Again, I missed that part of the presentation, so I just wanted to make sure this wasn't something that's coming to council for us to take a vote and make such a decision. This is not that lane. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Alder. Chris, go ahead.
Thank you. I guess just to remind folks, as Ann mentioned, I've been going to the meetings on this representing TC for it's a local officials advisory council, I think it's called. And I have sent some comments to the WisDOT team already, sort of to this. I guess just my general thoughts on this whole process and the options and stuff is that it's great to see what feels like a stronger focus on safety and connections for people walking and biking. And I think there's a real effort being made here to do that. And I appreciate the creativity on some of these designs. It's kind of great to see a design that we can't find an example of anywhere in the country. That's kind of impressive. Regarding the choices here, I mean, option 2 and 3 are a better option. I wouldn't love walking along any of them, like especially if I had a kid or something, right? So I would have loved to see something that looked a whole lot like a boulevard, like Robbie was saying, and I just don't think we're going to get to something like that. And I think there's a real option to improve safety, improve connectivity, and everything here. But like Alder Figueroa was just saying, like the decision I think is ultimately going to come down to which option can fix traffic problems at the intersections. Like that's a major focus of this effort. And I don't think there's a way around that. What if you're trying to balance moving cars quickly through the intersections with bicycle and pedestrian safety, one approach an agency can take is to address the traffic congestion and then check and then see what we can do around the edges to make those connections and safety improvements for bikes and pedestrians. The other approach, the more modern, I think, innovative approach is to say we can't do both. Like it's a balance between the two. And we may not be able to improve congestion as much as we want if we are really going to improve pedestrian and bicycle safety and connectivity. And I just hope that's something that the team is thinking about as they're moving forward. I know there's surveys about like how important is congestion and versus connectivity and all these things. And of course, a lot of people are going to say, fix the traffic. Why wouldn't you have asked that question? Yeah, fix the traffic. But it just takes, one person maybe who's, unhoused or whatever, never came to any of these meetings, never gave feedback, trying to cross the street, can't cross the street, maybe gets killed. That's enough to justify making bicycle and pedestrian improvements a priority, no matter how many people in a survey said, like, fix the traffic congestion. So that's just kind of how I'm thinking about this. And I just hope that that's heard.
So can I unpack that for just a second? We do in our recommendations ask them to consider looking at what this intersection could be if there was that traffic reduction. Because I think the mayor was thinking that way too. Why are we not considering reducing lanes rather than, and that would really be a pedestrian bike focus, right? And so that's in there. It sounds like from your comment, when I put at the end of this, you'd like that explored. Could there be a lane reduction, and would the congestion be so insurmountable that we couldn't live with it? You know what I mean?
Fair, Chris? Okay.
Yep.
Mhm.
I mean, I know Tom and staff and everybody are thinking about this. Just feel like worth talking it through.
Sure. I mean, there's a whole section on ped bike connectivity and issues. Pepe, go ahead.
Thanks, Ann, and thanks, Chris, for your last word, because that made me think a lot of what we're going through here. What Tom just said, adding a comment for reducing lanes as an option. I think that's something that really gets me really excited, because even if you look at all these options, I mean, like Alderfield was mentioning, like none of them really looks like perfect, of course, in terms of what we can offer to people living in the area, going to the businesses around and trying to get across the street. I've seen people lean towards concept number 3, and I was kind of paying a lot of attention to it and looking at the real benefits around it, in terms of course having reduced crossing distances and crossing volumes, which is of course a point of important matter in terms of being exposed to potential let's say I'm kind of looking for the word, but potential crashes or points of conflict for pedestrians and people getting across. That's something that's really attractive, but I'm also thinking, after you mentioned, yes, we can only make recommendations or send comments here, but of course, it's kind of obvious to think that if they are redeveloping this area, it's because they probably have in mind, improving flow, and we're talking about car flow. So I think we also need to be strategic in terms of what we recommend or what we send our information, our opinion about, because even if we don't like a concept like 4, let's say, it's still, if you look at it, it's potentially one that calls a lot the attention of people that would love to prioritize car flow, a solution like what we have in Odana Road and the Beltline right now. So an option like that, it would potentially also be beneficial to people that want to get across the street, because they're considering, an overpass for pedestrians or a tunnel in the case of Odana Road, something similar to that. Now, I think it's the point that you're making is really important, that I think it's worth it to ask about a potential lane reduction. So we're not only looking at options that are necessarily, reducing crossing distances, but if all of them had a lane reduction or an option like that, then that would be a benefit that will be across the all the options, and that way we're not so limited in the things that we're looking at, instead of just like everyone kind of focusing on concept 3, and then what happens if concept 3 is really not the one that is improving the car flow, then we kind of going back to base 1 more time. So I'm kind of going in circles here in a sense, but I just want to, in a summary, to call our attention to being strategic to what we offer as comments and options here, because we gotta have in mind what the DOT's main objective to this is. If it came to my own personal opinion, I do tend to look at concept 3 as an alternative because of the easement in terms of crossing. Now, I would love to see an option that is something like that, but that doesn't necessarily have so many driveways and other street connections closures around the intersection.
Yeah. Good.
Thanks, Pepe. Any comments, Tom, before we move on? No? Okay. Darren, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, Chris' comment really got me thinking, and I don't have anything to add. I think he said it so eloquently, but I just encourage city staff to work with partners at the DOT to really begin in all that we do, decentering the automobile, to really begin focusing on people on foot, on bike, wheeling, I'm an avid auto enthusiast. I love cars, but I also realize that cars aren't sustainable and they're not the answer for everybody, and so whatever we can do to decenter them out of our mode of thinking and quit thinking about flow of traffic and really think about flow of people in all modes is something we should look at. So, thank you.
Thanks, Darren. Alder Ferrero-Cole, go ahead.
I just want to say thank you to Pepe and Darren for pointing, reframing the conversation. I think that I totally agree with them that, again, we have input and we can work together with the DOT and we can have the greatest relationship with them. But again, in the event that something less likely gets selected, it would be great to focus on what are the core issues and how to manage to decentralize the car flows. So yeah, just want to say thank you to Pepe and Darren for kind of putting a different perspective in my head about how to better partner with the DOT. Thank you.
Thanks, Alder. And I just want to add my thanks to Chris, because you started us down that road, Chris, because focus on traffic and connections, safety for people walking and biking and connections for people walking and biking is something that we really focus on a lot at the Transportation Commission. So, and Tom, there's lots of comments with regard to that in your memo. So I think that we really come back to that.
Yeah.
The only question that I would have, I don't see any other hands up. In the neighborhood plan, it talks about making sure that we don't divide the community further. And we talked about that with regard to the interstate. And I didn't see any comments on your analysis of any of the options that you felt like it was dividing the community further. Did you have any thoughts with regard to that, Tom, on any of the options? Because I'm with everybody else that, 2 and 3 seem like the best options. And if we can reduce lanes, hopefully because of the interstate interchanges that we favored might in fact do that, potentially we could have some lane reduction. So any thoughts about further dividing the community?
Not so much. I will state that the southwest quadrant and the southeast quadrants kind of have expressway characteristics now. Like you have a frontage road on the southwest quadrant, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so those are almost disassociated, right? The southwest quadrant, right now it has some land uses, and we want to support those land uses, right? But then there may be future land uses too that are, we have to plan for people that are there today, but we also have to plan for people that are there, maybe 15 years from now, and where do they need to go? We're seeing on the north side, I think both the northwest and the northeast quadrants have land uses, and people need to be able to get between the northeast and the northwest quadrants now. And there were comments since I think the Ped Bike workshop on how could that be facilitated now, because there is housing in the northwest quadrant, and they do need, Walgreens, that serves a function. People need to get to that, right? Klein's just made a huge investment in their facility. It's kind of an east side destination, right? It's okay for people to be able to get to where they need to get, without having to cross 8 lanes, So I did try in the memo, I tried to state that our design vehicle was a vulnerable user, not the WB62, right? But it's more the
right.
Would you feel comfortable having your 10-year-old or 11-year-old on a bike go to Walgreens? And if you don't feel comfortable, then we're not comfortable with that alternative.
Yeah, for sure. Alder Martinez Rutherford, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that knowing this area pretty well, since I drive through there all the time, both northeast and northwest have a concentration of lower income people, and I want to make sure that they're served in the best way possible and not further impacted by what happens here. So that I would just urge us to consider that as well.
Yeah, and that aligns with kind of what I said. You know, the southwest and southeast are already kind of disconnected, but the northeast and northwest. So I'm going to write that down just so that we capture that in the comments.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. I know we have more to go on this item. Anybody have anything else on East Washington before Tom moves on? Okay, great discussion. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I'm going to be quicker on this. I know I'll just be quicker on this. I think it's a little bit more straightforward. This is a interesting. This is an intersection right now that was at one point a grade separation, and now they're looking at making an intersection. This is Lexington and Commercial, and this is the Walmart. There's some city buildings back here as well as a neighborhood. In fact, I lived back here when I first came to Madison. Things of concern or interest here is that this is the line that if we were to get passenger rail service, this would be the line where we get it. Then also, this is a bicycle and pedestrian connections here are very poor, and yet Walmart is a destination for lots of different types of people, right? This is where people get their stuff. In fact, if you drive by Walmart or ride by it they're often, the bus stops are always have someone at the bus stop, almost always. You know, it just always does. One other thing that has been mentioned is that, you know, here's an area of housing right here that doesn't really have access to Walmart, right? There's on the east side of Stoughton Road, there's not a north-south connectivity for pedestrians or cyclists. You have to get it pretty much in a car. On the west side, there is with that front of the service road, but on the east side, there's not. So those are just some things to think. Their concept one is kind of the existing interchange. They relocate the service road a little bit to provide a little bit more throw distance, but it's not much better. They do provide sidewalks on Commercial, but it's not. It's pretty much the way it is. Concept two, this has a jug handle. Okay, the jug handle, the way it works is it has right in, right out on Stoughton Road. So let's say if I'm traveling south on Stoughton Road and I want to go to Walmart, I just take a right turn off, go around underneath Stoughton Road, okay, and then I'm on the street that gets me to Walmart. So this it seems indirect, but we do it already kind of now in the city. Like if you think about the Verona Road interchange, right? They have a Verona Road frontage road to get to Home Depot, and then what's the tool shop? I go to that place with the tools on the Harbor Freight, right? So this is a typical type of jug handle. This does not have any signals on Stoughton Road. This does make it better for a cyclist crossing or a pedestrian crossing Stoughton Road. Like all of a sudden, they're just on this little local road, right? They don't have to cross 8 lanes of traffic on Stoughton Road like they currently do. They're more on a crossing that would be comparable maybe to the way Cottage Grove Road crosses Stoughton Road. If you've ever been on a bike on Cottage Grove Road, the way it crosses Stoughton Road, this is how that would feel. This provides a grade separation for Amtrak if we ever were to get Amtrak. Amtrak has stated that they would like a grade separation here if they could. Okay. I think we feel fine about this. This would be fine. I don't, we have the Highway 30 interchange right here, with signals, and then the East Washington. This is another jug handle. Instead of using right-ins, right-outs, this has a signal, right? So this just provides a signal right here. So if I want to go to Walmart, I would just take a left at the signal, just like I do now, so it's really no different there. The difference would be is if I want to go west on Lexington, I would take a left on the signal and then travel underneath Stoughton Road. I think staff feel fine about concept 2 or concept 3. This also provides a grade separation. This would be a comfortable bicycle crossing, pedestrian crossing. It provides a grade separation if we ever get Amtrak service. We're more hesitant about concept 4. Concept 4 is a full partial cloverleaf interchange. We think the interchange and kind of the free-flowing nature of the ramps, kind of what it does is it will lead to probably higher speeds, right? And then those higher speeds, they'll get to be higher speeds up until a signal that's just right here. The signal is relatively close. I think it's a third of a mile. So, you get on a freeway interchange just to have to stop this way. Similarly, let's say if I'm at Walmart and I want to go to East Washington, I get on this freeway interchange just to come to a stoplight, at Stoughton Road or at East Washington. We have a similar situation like this with the interchange at Aberg. And then we have an intersection directly north of Aberg. And so cars are flying up that interchange ramp, but then we have a school crossing right there at the end of the interchange ramp. And so it's very difficult for us to keep speeds in the appropriate range. We do have an RRFB there. It's a school crossing. It's not good. And so, we don't think that, Stoughton Road north of here or south of here is going to be 55 miles an hour. So why do we need a facility that's kind of designed for 55 miles an hour to connect them? This also requires 2 bridges. It does provide a bridge for Amtrak, but it requires another bridge for this interchange. So we're not as great about those. We don't spend as much time analyzing these. We just put that recommendation in our thing. I'm not going to go into depth about the bike ped recommendations. They're in there. One thing I will note, we would like, a north-south bike connection. It could be quite nice right now. If you go if you have a job at any of this light industrial area, it's like really hard to get there on a bike, like really crappy, really hard. If you want to get to the hospital for an appointment, and now there's going to be a clinic right here. How do you do that on a bike? There's just almost no way to do it on the bike. And so we feel like having that form of access on Stoughton Road would be really useful. I think it'd be useful on probably the east side is probably where it should occur. A problem with that though is, and this is not WisDOT's problem, so it's not their decision so much, it's the airport has indicated that they don't want any path facilities in the, zones there, I call them RPZs, I think, of their runways. And we're just calling out that that's kind of a double standard and that they're allowing cars in their RPZs, but they won't allow bikes in their RPZs. And we just think that's, seems like it's an incomplete, inconsistent application of their policies. And this is not necessarily WisDOT's preference or whatever, but I'm just saying that we're probably going to try and push that issue a little bit.
Right.
So that's kind of the end right now. Are there any comments on that?
Are there any additional comments on Lexington or the ped bike recommendations? Alder Field, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'll be brief. In this area also, folks in the Mayfair neighborhood and further east of the Mayfair neighborhood are also pretty interested in being able to cross Stoughton Road here. So whatever configuration of Lexington that ends up being chosen, we'd really like to see the ability or enhanced ability for pedestrian and bike crossing toward downtown. Thank you.
Okay. Other comments or questions? Had a lot of great feedback on this tonight. Bill, go ahead.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, Tom, I really like concept number 2 for the simple reason that you can combine it just to one bridge for both the Amtrak possibility as well as it looks like a good for bicycles and pedestrians. But the reason I kind of don't like 3 as well is I don't like to introduce another traffic signal if we don't have to. And I completely agree with not adding a loop ramps on I think is that 4 or 5 River.
Yeah, that's 4.
4. Yeah, I don't like that one. It looks just out of place.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Other comments or questions for Tom? Okay, you have what you need then, Tom?
Yeah, I do. And first, I've taken up a lot of airspace. Like we devoted an hour of this meeting or more to this, but I think these
very
are
important.
It's WisDOT's moving quickly on these 2 studies. I think it's really important for us. So I thank you for your time. I think we have to be proactive in our engagement with WisDOT, and so this helps us to do that. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, Denise, I know you had to join us late because you had another commitment. Did you have any other comments before we move off of Stoughton Road?
I really feel like Chris spoke to, my always overarching concern around building for all users. But I also am maybe I'm down the road too far yet, but I am curious about what WisDOT's engagement plan is going to look like. I serve on a couple of WisDOT things like the current active transportation 2050 plan and have been pleased with the increase in WisDOT engagement to diverse communities. So I just want to really put a strong plug in here that anything that WisDOT is doing that we can support and encourage, that we're really making sure the voices of folks who are often not included in these things, especially as it gets away from city and it's, the state and all of that, that I just think extra effort is going to need to go into outreach and really want to encourage that to happen.
Thanks, Denise. Great. Any other comments before we move on? Okay, thanks, Tom, and thanks to Jeff and Dan from WisDOT as well. So we are going to go back to item 1, which is comments on items not on the agenda. And Kyle, you have 3 minutes.
Oh, can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, cool. So I don't think it was on the agenda, but I was just, I guess there's currently a thing going on with like State Street. And you guys just approved me like a couple months ago, for my Madtown Gem thing. And they were talking about like making it pedestrian only for the 400 to 600 block, I believe, of State Street.
That actually was item 3 on our agenda tonight.
Oh, it was, because I just didn't know if it was or not. But I guess my question is, are you looking at like completely removing all traffic from that area? Because I wouldn't like, basically that would shut down like a majority of my business.
Yeah, in some ways, maybe as part of testimony, you can't really ask questions, but
right.
you can ask us at the City of Madison.
Okay.
And we can probably tell you what we know now and then keep you in the loop as things go on. So
can you write down my email so I can?
Yeah, I can do that. And then Renee will do, both I and Renee will do that. So that way we what
Do you have my it's Kyle, Kyle, Herman, Herman 1992 at gmail.com.
1992.
Yeah. And like, because like me and even my family were talking about this, and it was like, because we thought like State Street was kind of already like a pedestrian, thing. And like, I guess my thing is like, I go down there obviously like every Saturday night when it's pretty busy. And like the police officers, they'll have like 10 to 15 squad cars down there, and they have to like get through that area to go to calls and stuff. They use it pretty frequently. So I don't know how that would affect if we just made it strictly pedestrian. I mean, I get it. I get you guys want people to shop and totally, and I don't know if we could do kind of like something. This is just my opinion, but like, how University has a bike lane, if we could do like strictly a bike lane and I don't know, or something, divide it. And then I like all those other things you guys were talking about tonight. Like, I think we could do more like bike lanes and for pedestrians. And I don't know if that was talked about, or like tunnels and stuff. Cause I'm a truck driver, as well.
So Kyle, why don't you look at item number 3? It's Legistar 78895 on our agenda. It's a resolution with regard to taking the steps necessary to conduct an experimental closure of the 400 to 600 blocks of State Street. So why don't you take a look at that, and then you can certainly contact staff and talk about it further, because as was mentioned, this really isn't an opportunity to ask questions. It's an opportunity for us to hear from you on things that aren't on the agenda.
So just reach out and we'll we can.
It looks like he might be gone, so I think he can hear us. So
I removed permission to
okay,
to unmute.
Yeah. Why don't you just put him back? So Kyle, we heard from you and we appreciate your comments. And it looks like connecting with staff might be your best alternative. And you can look at that agenda item 3 and perhaps learn some more before you connect with staff.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, so we will move on to item number 5, approval of the South Owen Drive traffic calming. I believe that's Reed.
That is me. Thank you. Let me share my screen here. Can you see my screen?
We can, yes.
Perfect. All right. Okay. So good evening, everyone. My name is Reed Stitley with City Madison Engineering. I'm here tonight seeking approval for the installation of some traffic calming devices with an upcoming city street reconstruction project on South Owen Drive between Hillcrest and Regent Street. The project is 2 blocks long, and as part of the reconstruction, process. We send out a residential survey to the residents in the area, and also engage them during our public involvement meetings. And during this time, residents had reached out and shared their interest in having some speed humps installed, I guess I should say traffic calming devices installed with the upcoming project to curb speeding and to just overall increase safety for residents in the area. So with that general input, engineering did some speed studies in the area and looked at what the traffic was doing. And also we did the survey and garnered the general interest from the project area. And I have those results here tonight. From the speed study data, I guess just before I get into that, just so everyone's on the same page, here's this little map of where we're at. The project that will be going on is the reconstruction project between Hillcrest Drive here on South Owen Drive up to Regent Street. So with this project, we're looking to install the traffic calming devices on the second block, which would be the block between Bagley and Regent Street. The responses from the residential reconstruction survey, originally we had sent out mailers to the area. Of the 37 mailers, we got 16 responses back. So just under 50% response rate, which we think was pretty good. For the questions, there was multiple questions on the survey, but in relation to the traffic calming devices, there was basically question 9 asking if they wanted it, and then 10 was of what type. The majority of applicants who responded by saying yes, that they were interested in having traffic calming. And again, the majority of the other responses were either to have both, some combination of traffic calming, speed humps and traffic median circles, with then slightly more people after that favoring only the traffic circle, median circle, and then speed humps. In 2015, there was the reconstruction of Hillcrest Drive. That is, bring up my map here for everyone. Let's see here, just south of the project limits upcoming was this reconstruction of Hillcrest. In that project, they installed a traffic median circle. Actually, you can see it right here. And that's kind of what the
I'm not seeing it. Is anybody seeing it?
I'm sorry, can you see it now? Or
we're still seeing the survey.
Yeah, we're still seeing your survey.
Okay, let's see here. Nice. Okay. I think it said it's paused. 1 second.
It hasn't moved.
I'm gonna try one more time.
Okay.
Reed, this is Andy. You might be sharing the individual item and not the screen.
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest. Share the desktop instead of the application.
Okay. Screen 2. Let's see if this works better. How about now? Can you see a moving screen?
It is moving now, yes.
Okay. My apologies about that. So I guess this was the survey that we sent out. or one of the pages from the survey that had the questions on it. The area that we're looking at here is between Hillcrest Drive and Regent Street on South Owen Drive.
Yeah, we did see that.
Okay. In 2015, Hillcrest Drive was reconstructed to install this median island in the street in the intersection. So that's kind of what we're proposing to kind of mimic with the next intersection up at Hillcrest or at Owen and Bagley. So just some context there of kind of what's already there and kind of what's working right now. In addition to that, we did some traffic studies for the area. The first study, or for both studies, one was done in October 2022, one was done more recently in July 23. The results didn't really show a high level of speeding in the area. There was about the 85th percentile speed. I kind of have it summarized here is in the 25 to 27 miles per hour range. There was, I believe, between 5 to 7% of vehicles that were observed between these studies that were seen going above 30 miles per hour. And so there's kind of a conflict between what the studies are saying or showing here for the data and what the community is asking for for traffic calming measures. That being said, because we are reconstructing, it's the best time now, since we'll be kind of more or less obliterating the street and rebuilding everything, to be able to do it now and get these installed. With the outreach and the response from the community that we had, we're still going forward with pursuing the addition of the speed humps and the circle for the area. I have them showed on the plan, some draft plan sheets here. The first segment of Owen between Hillcrest and Bagley is generally too steep for these installations. Typically want them under the profile of the road to be less than 7%. This is a pretty steep section of Owen it's around 9.5%. So that's where we're kind of left with placing the speed humps on the section between Bagley and Regent. We generally have more gradual grades here, and the two that are proposed are offset by approximately 250 feet from the intersection to maintain those slowed speeds as folks would travel between the intersections between Regent and Bagley. The traffic circle is shown on this page. It's almost an exact copy of what we did recently at Hillcrest. It would be it would not be a grass center, though. It would just be a mountable terrace for turning movements for the area. So that's pretty much what we're proposing with the project as far as the traffic calming goes. I guess one other thing to note is it's not shown on these pages, but we are going to be installing with the reconstruction project. We'll be redoing the storm and sanitary with the project. So the storm sewers inlets would be located on the high sides of the speed humps on both sides to mitigate any ice damming and drainage issues that could happen from the water collecting on that side. So there would be drainage. There will be drainage inlets installed with a project on this along the street for that surface water runoff.
Okay, thanks, Reed. Comments or questions for Reed? Chris, go ahead.
Thanks. I have a question that I'm not sure Reed you'll be able to answer, but is this just simply part of the reconstruction project, or is this a Safe Streets project?
Yep, great question. So this would actually be part of the reconstruction project itself. So the speed humps would be done with the project typically near the end of construction.
Okay, thanks. And then just want to clarify what I'm hearing is that it really doesn't look like the speed humps are justified, but the neighborhood wants them, so we're proposing adding them. Is that kind of what we're saying here?
So typically, yep, sorry, go ahead.
No, I see Tom Moore has his hand up too. So if you want to answer, Reed, then Tom can make a comment.
Tom might have some great insight on this too. So he's
yeah.
You want him to go? You want him to go first, Reed, and then you can follow?
Sure.
Okay,
Yep.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, so I'll just explain the two scenarios. So one is Safe Streets Madison, which I know they're our new commission members, but that's when kind of people go through the process, our residents go through the process, and we rank it to see if it ranks high enough for a project. Historically, when we've had a reconstruction project, we kind of we don't use that process. We survey the residents, and if there's a strong support for traffic calming, we typically have included it. So this project, I would say, is right in that gray area where the residents want it. It's not really shown in the speed data or the crash history. But our thinking has been in the past that if the residents have a strong support for it, with a new street that's smooth, we can expect speeds to increase. There's kind of natural traffic calming right now, and rather than deal with it after the fact, we just include it with the reconstruction project. But with this one, I think it could go either way, so that's what kind of why we're bringing it here. Just relative to other streets, this would rank pretty much at the bottom of the list for Safe Streets Madison projects. The data just kind of doesn't show a really high speed, so I guess that's the background. Yeah.
Yep, perfect.
But the speeds may increase it with the better road was your other point, right, Tom?
Right. Yeah. So we've always thought, if it's a really rough road, the pavement rating here is a 3, so it's in pretty bad shape. And then there's that hill, so we would expect to probably get more complaints of speeding after the fact. So that's why we just include it with the project.
Okay. Thanks, Tom. Reed, did you have any other comments before we move on?
Thanks, Sam. Nope, that's great. I just sorry for kind of rushing through that. The project will add curb and gutter to the streets. So with the existing, you can kind of see it here. The street width, there's a lot of folks that park kind of on the existing terrace, and that won't be able to happen now with the reconstructed streets since we'll be adding curb and gutter. We're proposing kind of staggered parking, alternate side parking to match in with what was done on the previous section of South Owen Drive too. So that's also part of the traffic mitigation, traffic calming strategy for the area and to allow parking. So there will be parking too on the street. I just wanted to clarify that for folks.
Okay. Thanks. Let's see. Looks like people had hands popping up and down. We'll go with Darren.
Thanks, Anne. I was just trying to look at the section on my little screen. So just to clarify, because I think I can see them, there are sidewalks on this road. Did you?
Yes, there are existing sidewalks. Yep, on both sides of South Owen Drive.
And just had a question about the speed bumps and understanding that one section of it isn't sort of feasible to put it because of the grade. would there really be anything in your opinion recognized or realized by just adding the speed humps to the second part of that street, as opposed to just on-street parking and then the circle in the intersection?
I would say there will definitely be an impact from the speed humps. I think typically, from what I've seen, they can help maintain at least consistent speed, especially when they're spaced in the 250 feet to 500 foot intervals, just so folks can't, really speed up between them. So they'll help maintain those slower, consistent speeds and prevent folks from kind of ramping up in that area. To that being said, it is just like that section between Hillcrest and Regent Street, which is approximately like 800 feet long. So it's like Tom said, it's kind of right in that gray area. We've heard from folks that they want them, and just in our speed study, which are only for 24 hours, for each one. So it's kind of in that area where, but in general, I think they would still provide some traffic calming benefit in that they can help dissuade, those speeding in that area, just because they'll be hitting those humps.
Is that all you had, Darren? Okay. Bill, go ahead.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, I just looking at the map as far as the route is whether it's could be potentially conceived to be a cut through, but I'm not sure. But it is the only road that goes completely through the neighborhood, straight through. One of the things I think, if putting I'll say the plus putting in the speed humps is you get to do the drainage, and you can do it correct without having to worry. You can put the inlets where they should be if you're going to have speed humps. And many times when we put in speed humps, we don't have that luxury because we can't obviously change the storm system. It's just too expensive. But in this particular case, that I suspect might be one of the reasons why the need for the project. So I think it's opportunity to take advantage of that. So you put the inlets at the most desirable location for the traffic calming measures. And I really like the circle too. Thanks.
Thanks, Bill. Alder Figueroa Cole, go ahead.
Thank you. My hand kept on going down.
Yeah.
I don't know why. So yeah, I had exactly the same question as Chris had, like which on the which program this was. So thank you for the feedback on that regard. I had to just put my 2 cents in here. I mean, as much as I support this program, and you guys know that I'm your number one cheerleader, things like this makes my job very difficult. Everybody wants speed bumps in the city. Everybody, and I can, and the only way that I say no to that is like we have a process on the city for safe streets. We have to put the name on the list. We need to get evaluated for traffic. We're using data. We have, I have this speech down on what this policy is. And sometimes I get Renee involved, and she again turns all that down and refocus people on the policy. But then here we are in contradiction to the policy. This doesn't even make it to the top of the list for sidewalks. So it makes it very hard for me to say to other people, no, when they want theirs. So I understand the prediction that in the future these might be beneficial, but I really hope that the commission, along with their approval, have a good justification as to why we are expending money on one of the most expensive traffic calming methods, which are the speed bumps, so we can then justify that in future requests. That's how I feel about it. Like I'm here thinking, so that's my 2 cents. So I really appreciate if this is approved. that there's something that we can point back in the future to justify this thing not following the rules that we're using to follow the street calming policy that we put in place. And it cannot be just, oh, this is not done under that program, this is done under this other program. We're solving the same issue. So I will appreciate clarity on why we will do this here and not in other places.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And that's a great question. And I'm going to ask Tom Lynch and Tom Moore to comment, because there are different programs. And Renee, if you want to hop in as well, because when we have new streets that are going in, we've put in traffic calming along with those new streets because it may be paid for by the developer. Again, it's part of a new construction program, or where we have street reconstruction or street resurfacing. So they are different programs from Safe Streets Madison. And, perhaps it's hard to explain because the criteria does appear to be different depending on which program we're looking at. Now Tom and Renee, am I on the right track with that?
Right. Yeah, I would say that the big difference is that we're making a pretty big change to the street with the full reconstruction. So we're kind of anticipating things and trying to make the best street possible. Since we're focusing on that street, it's kind of like the Lake Mendota Drive. Speed humps aren't the only traffic calming device or item that we add to streets during reconstructions. We've got we narrow streets or add bump outs or change crossings, add sidewalk. So we're kind of looking at the entire street when we do the reconstruction. So we're trying to take everything into account. So it would be kind of difficult to say we're going to reconstruct the street, but traffic calming is off the table unless it ranks high enough in the Safe Streets program. So that's kind of why we separate out the two. It's just the big change that's coming to the street and getting feedback from the residents about how that fits in with our reconstruction.
I mean, and I appreciate that again, but it shouldn't be this complicated. Like honestly, and I don't know where we are with the website, trying to combine all these things together so people can see the difference on the different programs and understand what the rules are. But from my position as an elder, knowing that every time someone complains about speeding, they don't come asking me for a light, or they don't come asking me for a stop sign. They want speed bumps. And it's not something that we freely say to people, yeah, sure. No, we have a process in place that makes sense. And situations like this, where we are solving the same issue but using a different method, makes it hard for people to understand why we're doing that. I mean, and the main reason that I am a supporter of this program is because of the huge equity component to it. So again, it's just a matter of how information flows and how it shouldn't be this complicated. That's all I'm saying. I understand what you're saying. I'm not trying to, I mean, again, I understand what you guys are saying. I'm just expressing to you my discomfort with,
of course.
With the language that we're using. That's what I'm saying.
Sure. Appreciated. Any other staff have a comment before we move on?
Yeah, there's one thing that I forgot to mention is that just based on our experience and kind of with the resident survey, is that speed humps have been very polarizing among residents. So that's part of the equation is if there's a really strong support, then that's why we give it extra consideration, because we have seen streets where there isn't a strong support. So it's kind of a holdover from the neighborhood traffic management program where it was all based on the resident support. So that's kind of the question here, right? Does this fit in with how we're doing Safe Streets Madison? And right, I don't think there's a perfect answer to that. I think that is a question.
Yeah. And in the Safe Streets Madison report, we do talk about not addressing issues until reconstruction comes up, because it makes economic sense to do that as well. So is that all you had then, Alder? Alder Figueroa Cole, is that all you had then?
Sorry. Yeah, that's all I got. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Denise, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. Yeah, I want to support what Alder Figueroa Cole just shared. I'm in this neighborhood nearly every weekend, and I'm really conflicted about this situation. I do witness cars flying down that their build up speed, they do clip along. So I can see the benefit of the traffic calming measures, because then by the time they get to the bottom of the hill at Bagley, they've got some good tailwind behind them. So it makes sense to me because of their street reconstruction. And I also really hear Veronica, because this is a pretty comfortable neighborhood with residents that are really engaged. So that's those survey results at being 50% or so return rate, that's impressive. So I think it raises an equity question for me about folks having access, feeling empowered to give feedback to the city. Doing a reconstruction, do they get more of what they might be asking for than folks who don't feel as empowered to give feedback to the city, or don't know how to give that feedback? So I just want to kind of put a pin in that. I'm not saying, no, I'm not going to support this one, but I just really, I think it gives us pause to keep trying to really wrestle with these ones that are really, really complex.
Yeah, and I see what everybody's talking about, equity issues and consistency in how we deal with requests. Chris, go ahead.
Thanks. I also appreciate the Alder speaking up. I'm inclined to say we shouldn't do this for slightly different reasons. I mean, I think it is confusing why some folks can get a speed hump and others can't. I think that's just sort of the nature of reconstruction. Like, if you want bike lanes, there's two ways to do it: reconstruction or safe streets, right? The same goes for speed humps. But I think, the bigger concern in my mind is like, why not is not a good enough reason to do it. I don't think our vision of safe streets is to have speed humps across the entire city. Speed humps we do with Safe Streets Madison when it addresses a safety concern because the road was designed too big or whatever. So I think if we can't design a safe road without speed humps, that's a problem. So let's get it right and not just lean on speed humps all the time.
But the traffic circles, let me just ask about that. We've been talking a lot about speed humps, but there's circles as well, right, Reed?
Yes, so it's a combined approach here, and that is actually something that we, proposed or that was a question if they kind of supported speed humps, a traffic median circle, or both. So I could see that being as a potential alternative to this, just kind of mimicking what was done in the past and having kind of, it's not necessarily a halfway point, for the project, but, at the intersection of Bagley, to kind of have some kind of calming measure there. So I guess we're open to that discussion as well. I guess.
So I guess my question back to you, Chris, and to Denise and to others is: are you, maybe we can let Darren talk and then come back? Are you supportive of the traffic circle, just not the speed hump?
Yeah, I guess. Well, I still have the floor. Yeah, yes, the traffic circle.
Okay. All right. Okay, Darren, go ahead.
All right. So Chris had kind of addressed some of what I was going to say. But my question was, how wide is the street? I'm not able to see it on my little screen as I'm traveling. So
Yep. So the reconstructed street will be 28 feet face to face from curb to curb, which would allow for 2 12-foot travel lanes, and there would be 8-foot kind of parking spots for the alternate side parking against the curb.
yeah, so then I mean, it just goes back as I wrestle. Okay, so this is reconstruction, and I understand it's in an existing neighborhood and there's existing streets, but where are we at with looking at this with complete green streets? And have we done a design of the street that says we don't need to use these speed humps? Because I've heard the concerns that, when it's resurfaced, it's going to be faster. Well, then why are we making it so that it's going to be faster? Like, if we have this chance to do something different with it in reconstruction, why aren't we doing that now? And then I also just look at the speed humps as a maintenance liability down the road. That's just one more aspect of street reconstruction that's going to have to be dealt with. I'm just, and then the last question I have, the survey response, is that the percentage of respondents, or is that like the total? When it says 54% want both, is that 16 who responded?
Yes, this is of who responded. Sorry, the final 3 rows here of the 16 people that responded, and the 13 that said yes. This is the breakdown of the 13 people that responded and how they kind of voted for the things. So I tried to kind of cascade it from like.
So then that just really puts it in context for me. That, I mean, it's 54% of 13. So what's that? A little bit more than 6.5 people said both, and a little over 3 people said they want speed humps. Out of 37 addresses, it just doesn't seem like a really clear thing to me that this is a direction there. I'd be fine with the traffic circle because I think there's one already there. I have one on my street. I do realize what they do to slow down the traffic, but definitely not in support of speed humps.
Yeah. And Rita and Tom, did you have any response to Darren's question? Why are we building the street so that it might be faster?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there is some reality to it. I guess I heard the pavement quality is at a 3. That is a pretty drastic change, but I think 28 feet is well within kind of our neighborhood yield street, neighborhood street kind of configuration. And so I think, we're kind of figuring out the balance of traffic calming to narrowing as we move forward, and we're kind of in this interim period where some projects were before Complete and Green Streets was approved. Now we're having some that are coming that are, but 28 feet is definitely kind of typical.
Yep. Okay. And thanks, Renee. That 28 feet mimics to the reconstructed section that was done in just before this, 2015, I think. Sorry, maybe it was 2008. But basically, the section from Hillcrest down to Mineral Point that was reconstructed and has the same cross section. So kind of just matching in to what that was with the 28 feet.
Okay. Denise, go ahead.
Yeah, I could feel much better about the traffic circle because it also mirrors what happened on Hillcrest. And I know that there was quite a bit of, resident request for speed bumps on Hillcrest, which didn't get put in. So then, I also think about kind of the divisiveness in the neighborhood. Like, why did you get speed humps and we didn't get speed humps? It's just not necessarily healthy for neighborhood. So it would parallel that. And it's also, it is a good feature that I could see using in in really diverse neighborhoods. I thought I heard you say that that wasn't going to be a grassy surface. It's going to be, is it going to be pavement? Kind of at the center of the traffic circle. And if it is, you know, I always get concerned about adding more pavement to our already way too hot environment. So can you speak to that?
Yep, exactly. So we are proposing just a mountable median island. So essentially, a larger vehicle can use it for its turning movement. It's also a maintenance, one less thing kind of to maintain issue wise. And this is a pretty small median island. I can give you a quick dimension if you can bear with me for just 1 second. So the amount of like grass that would be added is fairly minimal. Let's see here. This is it's approximately 10. Actually, that's not even the grassy area would be approximately 8 feet across, like an ellipse, 8 feet by 5 feet or so. So it's a pretty minimal amount of grass that would be there, and more in my kind of thinking. More of a maintenance issue than than it being just paved with concrete. It also then allows the full circle to be used for multiple turns if needed.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay. Other comments or questions? I've heard preference for the traffic circle and not the speed humps. Is that what I'm hearing? And if so, he's looking for approval, so we would need a motion. Darren?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the project minus the speed humps.
Okay, is there a second? Pepe, is that a second?
Yes.
Okay, discussion. Or did you wish to speak to your motion, Darren?
No, not at all. Thank you.
Okay, discussion. Robbie, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just gonna very briefly say, I agree that we need to be consistent on how we put in these things. I mean, I am familiar with Owen because it is actually a fairly important bicycle connection, especially because Midvale Boulevard does not have adequate bike facilities. So people use Owen to get north-south. So I think that it probably needs something to slow the speeds down, but I really don't think we should be reacting to just the neighbors' preferences when we do these reconstructions. I mean, we were trying to get away from that in the first place. And so we need to look at how does this street function? How does it fit into the complete and green streets? What's the appropriate treatment? So I think the traffic circles are probably the appropriate feature. But it just in case people aren't aware, it is actually a fairly important bike connection as well.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Robbie. Other comments or discussion? Very excellent discussion.
Yes, thank you very much.
About a topic that has come and gone. I am going to assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain. Bill?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you so much, Reed and Tom. And Alder Figueroa Cole. Hopefully that helps us on the track toward consistency.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah, and it's a good conversation for us to have because we're going to be having another Safe Streets Madison conversation coming up here probably in September. Okay, thanks, Reed and Tom and Renee and everybody. Next, we have item 6, which is Hawthorne Court reconstruction. So this is a different reconstruction. Bonnie, is that you?
Yes. That is me.
Okay.
Hi, good evening. I am Fadil Musa with City Engineering. I'll be presenting tonight the proposed layout and cross-section for the Hawthorne Court reconstruction. I am going to share my screen to present the displays. Can anybody confirm that you're seeing a PDF?
We can see it. Yes, we can.
Perfect. Okay, so I'll be presenting 3 displays tonight. So the first one that I'm currently showing is plan.
Hang on, excuse me one second. Darren, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just wondering if you can make this full screen and blow it up a little bit.
So it's a big page. I'm gonna zoom in and I'm gonna pan over it. Does that work better, Darren? Perfect. Okay. So on the first exhibit that I'm presenting, I'm showing the limits of Hawthorne Court and a layout on plan view of the proposed improvements. So for project limits, Hawthorne Court will be reconstructed from University Avenue on the south side to just about short of State Street on the north side. For background of what's going on, and I don't know if the Transportation Commission is familiar, but the State Street campus garage will be reconstructed next year.
Yeah, the folks, Fadi, the folks that were on the former Transportation Commission have heard many times about the State Street campus garage redevelopment, but there are some who are new. So,
understood. Okay, so I'm going to give a quick background on this. So the current parking facility that is to the west of Hawthorne Court, so it's adjacent to it, it's between Hawthorne Court and Lake Street, will be reconstructed and will be a multi-use building. So it's going to have a public parking facility, it's going to have housing, it's going to have the intercity bus terminal, and I think I'm missing something that has it, but anyways, it's going to be reconstructed for the following 3 years. Construction is planned to start in 2024 and be completed in 2026. Hawthorne Court itself is being presented tonight for review and feedback, but the plan is to reconstruct Hawthorne in 2026. The reason why we are presenting this tonight is that the right-of-way here is narrow, and we're trying to distribute the facilities for vehicular traffic and pedestrians as best as possible. And the design of Hawthorne Court, if not done at this time, might not work with the design of the building. But it's very important that we nail down the cross-section and the vertical profile of Hawthorne Court to ensure that when the building is up and operating, everything is going to work as efficiently as possible. Okay. Zooming into the dimensions. So we're proposing to have a 5-foot sidewalk and 11.5 feet wide road. So that's measured from face of curb to face of curb. And to the east, and the sidewalk is going to be on the west side. And to the east of the curb, it's going to be a short section of pavement, which is going to just basically fill from the back of the curb to the right of way. On the next step, I'll leave the questions for later. If anybody has any questions or any doubts, please let me know.
Sure. If anybody has a question as we go forward, just raise your hand and we'll go ahead and take them as we go. I'm assuming we don't have any other registrants. Is that correct, Aiden?
Yep, that's right.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. On the second exhibit, I'm also presenting a plan view of Hawthorne Court, of the finished product. But now the difference is that I'm presenting the traffic flows post-construction of the building and also post-construction of Hawthorne Court. So if you're not aware, Hawthorne Court is going to be used as the travel way for the buses that are going to be using the bus terminal of the new building. Hawthorne is going to be one way only. Currently, it's two-way, but after construction, the plan is to make it one way only, northbound. So access will be off of University Avenue. There's going to be 4 entrances or 4 driveways or parking lots that are going to be on Hawthorne Court. Currently, there are 2 existing ones. Both of them are on the east side. They're labeled as private parking. So here's one. The other one is on the northeast quadrant. And there's going to be 2 new entrances to the new building. One is going to be for the bus terminal, and the other one is going to be for the private parking of the housing component of the building. The entrance for the public parking to the new building is going to be off of Lake Street. So for example, the property that has the driveway on the southern part on the east side, they will access Hawthorne Court as they regularly do, as they do right now. They will drive northbound from University Avenue to Hawthorne Court. They're going to make a right turn to the parking lot. When they're going to leave the parking lot, they're going to make a right turn onto Hawthorne Court, and they will exit Hawthorne using the future bus terminal. For the residents that have the driveway on the northeast quadrant, the same deal. They're going to drive northbound on Hawthorne Court from University Avenue, and to leave the property, they're going to drive southbound up to a point in which they're going to reach the bus terminal, and they will not be allowed to drive southbound anymore. So they will have to make a right turn onto the bus terminal and take an exit into Lake Street. So again, this is the proposed layout of the traffic flows post-construction. And finally, the third exhibit is the proposed cross-section for Hawthorne. So going from east to west, there's going to be a proposed 5-foot sidewalk. It says 6 feet because it's measured from the right-of-way to the face of curb, but the sidewalk actually is going to be 5 feet. The curb head is going to be 1 foot wide. The width of the pavement, like I stated on the first exhibit, is going to be 11.5 feet wide. And on the east side, it's going to be 1.5 foot wide. The section behind the back of the curb is going to be concrete, also filling the gap between the back of the curb and the right of way. I think that's pretty much it. I'll be open for questions.
Hey, I know there's been a lot of discussion with the bus companies, and Tom Lynch, I think you're still here. A lot of maybe not, maybe Tom is not still here, but there's been a lot of conversation about how this might work. Correct, Fadi? And so we're reflecting what was decided with regard to how vehicles were going to flow through the facility, correct?
Correct. That has been discussed, I believe, in many times and in many ways. Now, we like I mentioned, we would like to nail down this geometry in this cross section. One key component here that I did not mention because it's not traffic related, Hawthorne Court has an enclosed depression mid-block. So both ends, meaning State Street and University Avenue, are higher. So every drop of water that gets into Hawthorne Court, it doesn't have anywhere to go except via storm sewer. So this geometry, once it is kind of approved by the city committees, we want to design it in a way that we know that the building itself is going to function and operate in an efficient way. If any changes were to happen and the building is designed, now we're restricting ourselves, and we might not have the best product when finished. So that's the general idea.
Okay. And you're just looking for review and feedback from us tonight. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So comments and questions for Fadi. Chris, go ahead.
Thank you. It all makes sense to me. I do recall that a while back there were concerns raised, and maybe you mentioned this and I just missed it, but I don't remember what those were and if this addresses those. I don't remember if did it have to do with people walking through here or something.
I believe I've seen some concerns about pedestrians facilities in here with the existing conditions. Currently, there's a 2-foot section of concrete on the, and I think I can show that on my screen if you.
I believe it does, Chris. And I think that's why it's going one way, right, Fadi? So that you're making a place for people to walk.
Correct. Install a pedestrian facility.
Yep.
To meet ADA compliance. So this section currently here is so narrow that although it's called a sidewalk, it doesn't meet ADA compliance. What we're proposing will meet ADA compliance, and it's going to be a huge improvement.
Yep.
Thanks. I just needed that refresher, I think.
Sure. Yep. It's been a while since we've seen it, Chris. Yep. Other comments or questions? Pepe, go ahead.
Hey, Fadi, thanks for the presentation. My only question is, you just mentioned that there will be room for walking. Does that mean that there will be also walking entrances to the ramp for private parking and to the bus terminal?
Correct. Yeah. Yes.
Well, I just want to make sure that if we're offering pedestrian facilities, that we have all the closed ends.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Hey, other comments or questions for Fadi? Okay, Denise, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't have any particular questions. I just wanted to do a public thank you to Fabi for including the narrative. This was a great example of accessibility. So in Legistar, there was a brief narrative of the 3 drawings that, and it was incredibly useful to me. So I want to call it out as a great example of accessibility. So it just lessened the intensity of me needing to blow up those drawings, make them really large and look at them. I could use the narrative and then compare the narrative to the drawing. So I just want to do a public shout out of thank you for that.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thanks for recognizing that, Denise, and thanks for doing that, Fadi.
I want to mention something, Denise, and I appreciate that. So that work was done by Emma. She's the project manager for this reconstruction project, but she's off on vacation, and a well-deserved vacation, so I'm covering for her. But yeah, she did that work, and thank you for the feedback. I'll give the feedback to her. I appreciate it.
Great, thank you so much.
Would you please let her know from us that it was very much appreciated?
For sure.
Okay, thanks, Fadi. Okay, other comments or questions? Okay, great, thanks. So we will move on to Seago and Sheboygan resurfacing project. And I just want to make sure, Ada, we don't have anybody registered to speak on this. We got some emails, but we don't have anybody here to speak on this.
Yep, that's correct. I'll double check and let you know.
Okay. Okay, thanks. So we're going to switch from Fadi, who can stop sharing his screen if you would, please. And Mario, are you going to do the next one?
See my screen. Apologies.
No, Fadi, you need to stop sharing your screen.
I'm looking. Where is it?
Thank you.
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. I'm no expert on that stuff, so. Okay, there we go.
Perfect. Can everyone see my screen?
You can. Can you make it so that it's full screen?
Yes.
If it's a slideshow, can you make it full? Thank you. Perfect.
Yes, here we go. Okay. So, yeah, my name is Mario Galindes. I'm a staff engineer at City Engineering. So we are doing a project on Sheboygan Avenue and Seago Road between Whitney Way, Seago, University to Regent. This is on the west side of the city. So this is a sort of resurfacing with utilities. So we're doing some utility work in here, but we're keeping kind of the curbs in the same place, trying to keep as many of them as possible, really just replacing the roadway and then making some improvements within those constraints. So one thing I'd like to highlight is we have a couple BRT stations in the project limits, one at Eau Claire and Sheboygan and one at Sheboygan and Seago. And both stations are going to be constructed before the project begins. So we'll have to, work within those limits. And we've looked at their plans and coordinated them with ours. There are some spots where they will need to kind of update their plans as new things have come to light and we continue with this project. So for Sheboygan Avenue, we are, keeping the curves in the same place. Layout of the street, we wanted to provide a facility for bikes on the street, but keep kind of the large trees we have on this block, kind of keeping the curve in the same place as I mentioned before. So we have buffered bike lanes and keeping the drive lanes like 11 feet to accommodate those BRT buses that will be going down the street. So yeah, our priorities here, transit priority with the BRT system and the tree canopy. These are large, mature trees. And so currently we have trees, we have bus stops and loading zones, and we have 2-hour parking kind of in this flex zone here. And we're proposing to keep the trees, the bus stops, and the loading zones, and then add kind of the bike lanes here. Notably, so we do have 2-hour parking here on this street. It is, permitted 2-hour parking. So we will need to get approval from this commission before we remove that parking. And that will happen probably at another meeting. But we are looking for input on these options and this design today. All right, so I wanted to highlight as well, we have these current existing loading zones on Sheboygan Avenue that are kind of written into the code. And because there are, residents in these apartment buildings here, they need a place to, for paratransit and other reasons to get dropped off and picked up here on Sheboygan. We wanted to keep these loading zones in place. So, it will be dashed out, marked, signs will be put up, and then cars will be able to pull in and out. Notably as well, we need these similar loading zones for metro buses, because unfortunately this BRT station needs to be a transfer point because some of the lines cannot run all the way into downtown. So some buses will need to stop here so people can offload and get onto the BRT buses. And so this is something we had to accommodate with this design. Unfortunately, our width is, we're only at 42 feet here, so we have limited width to work with. And this is kind of a compromise that we've come up with. For this building, we are going to be moving their loading zone down the street to accommodate the bus loading zone. So we did a questionnaire on this layout. I think the biggest concerns that we found were, people didn't like that there's, it's a painted bike lane, so there's a lack of physical barrier between vehicles and bike lanes, and this is something that we'd like your input on as well, as to whether we want to have a buffer in, buffers on this street, some sort of, median or other option here. Okay, so let's move on to Seago Road. So Seago is quite a bit wider. I think we've got 32 feet on each side, separated by a 26-foot median. So it's quite large. This sort of north end of Seago has been previously sort of decided with the BRT project. So we've extended some of it, we've added some things, but this layout with the bike lane crossing over and going straight through is from them, as is the Sharrow on the turn right and the bus only right turn lane here for the BRT buses coming out of the station at Seago and Sheboygan. Notably, the median or the bike lane's the buffer's a little smaller up here on the top, just because the roadway is a little narrower at this Fray intersection. So for the rest of Seago, this is, it's part of the All Ages and Abilities Bike Network. We really wanted to improve there's a history of pedestrians having issues crossing in this area, especially since the road is so wide. We wanted to improve those crossing locations, but just the whole street in general, give bicycles a comfortable facility, make sure that we're narrowing crossings. We're reducing from 2 lanes to 1 in each direction. We want to reduce speeds. We want to, make sure that this road is accessible to everyone. So we have 2 options that we've developed. So this option is kind of a continuation of, if you're familiar with the area, south on Seago, further south in this project is a more lower density residential area. And this was implemented, I think, a few years back. We have a parking lane and a double buffered bike lane to protect against car doors, as well as the drivers here. This is all painted, so it would just be the parking lane, buffered bike lane, and then drive lane here. Keeping the curves in the same place. And we would have bump outs at intersections. So right here, this is at Sawyer Terrace, and we would bump out to the bike lane so bikes could pass through the or stop and pass through the intersection, and cars could as well, but we'd still have these, shorter crossings, which would be good for pedestrians. And at these intersections as well, we do have, the lighting and the signaling we'll talk about, I think, the separate issue. That's one of the things we want to advice on as well, or input on. So option B, we've got a parking protected bike lane, 4-foot median here. Really gives separation for bikes from cars, and just really gets to that all ages and abilities score that we want for bikes. And since this design is a little more complex, I wanted to give kind of a broader overview of what's going on throughout the whole street. So at intersections, we've got 12-foot medians. There was a comment about how bikes would have trouble turning left onto Vernon if they were trying to turn onto Vernon. And at Vernon, we think it would make sense to put a curb cut here and have just a place for bikes to come through here, since this is not going to be a signalized intersection. Moving through, Heathercrest, we only have a crossing on one side because this crossing kind of goes nowhere because there's a retaining wall here, so nobody's walking here. It gets really narrow over here, so you can't walk. And then over here, there's really nothing. The main pathway from the apartment complex comes in here. So we thought it made sense to only have the crossing on this side. So yeah, at Sawyer Terrace, we did get the same comment about turning left for bikes, and then there's also a park path that comes out here. So if we do go with option B, we'll put like kind of a ramp here so bicyclists coming out of the park can get onto this bike lane here. And we'll also want to expand this sidewalk here to 8 feet to accommodate those left turning movements, as well as any bikers who want to come to the other bike lane across the street. And that's the one thing that happened since I sent this presentation and we got that feedback. So I wanted to make sure that it was included. So yeah, it's again, at Seago and Sheboygan, we've got the BRT infrastructure here. Important to note that it is offset. This BRT project was designed before this curb was pulled back, and the aerial is also taken before then. So currently the curb is back here. So that is one thing that they still need to do their revision on, and once we have their revision, we'll incorporate it into our plans. But for now, this will have to do. And we're using this in configuration. We're pulling drivers who are moving through the intersection away from the BRT buses stopped here. Have a turn lane. And this sort of layout with the bus only right turn lane, the drive lane is also determined by BRT, and there will be a light at this intersection to help the BRT move through efficiently. Yeah, and then when we were on site, I just wanted to include this there. I think it's important for us to acknowledge that these designs affect real people. And this is at Heather Crest, which is leading into the hill, the shopping center. And some adults had to literally go into the street and put their hands up and stop traffic in order for it to be safe for children to cross, which is not, ideal. So we'd like to ameliorate that situation if we can. Yeah, and then we sent a questionnaire about this one as well, and support was pretty clear in favor of option B, and that's the one we probably recommend as well. So in terms of, I didn't want to actually stop sharing my screen. We do have some questions to kind of focus the presentation or your sort of response to all this, because I know it's a lot.
Okay,
So
yeah,
Mario,
I have some up here.
Can I just tell you that if you can make it bigger, and also you need to anything that is not distributed ahead of time can't screen reader technology does not work for things that are shared in Zoom. So you need to read what is on the screen.
Okay, I will do that.
So
I apologize.
all of our, no, that's okay. So all of our members can understand and partake in the discussion.
Okay, I will go through them one by one then and stop and ask for input then, since this is kind of different questions. So.
And Mario, before you get started, I just want to ask Renee, do we still have Renee with us here?
Yes, still here.
Excellent. You sent out what I personally thought it was really helpful, was a complete Green Streets draft checklist for this project. And before we answer the questions, is there anything in that checklist that you wanted to cover? Because there was some additional information in there, I think, Mario, that maybe wasn't in your presentation. Am I right, Renee?
Yeah, there is some additional information in there. I know that the meeting's already long. I don't want to make it longer, but I do want to start kind of rolling out that part of the implementation part of Complete and Green Street. So I filled this out. It says draft on it a lot of places because it's an opportunity for you to look at it. It doesn't have to be now, and provide some feedback about kind of what it looks like, what's in there. Is it too much? Is it too little? Are there things missing? Would it be better in some other format? So I just wanted to kind of get people thinking about it as we start rolling this out into the future. So we don't have to talk about it tonight. People can think about it, and they can just contact me directly if things are missing or too much or anything.
Sure. Yeah, Robbie, did you have a comment on that? Because I had a question for the group. Go ahead.
Actually, I had a question for Mario, or before we start the questions. I had a question starting on Sheboygan Avenue.
Okay. Can I, before we go there, Robbie, can I just say, would it be better for us to have this, Renee, would you appreciate a discussion at TC so we could put this as a separate agenda item, the Complete Green Streets draft checklist? Because, okay, Robbie's got thumbs up. Do people agree with that? Because I just got it today and I think you'd get better feedback. So how about a separate agenda item, Renee?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I wanted to get it done and get it uploaded so that it would have some context with this actual project, but not necessarily for a discussion tonight. But in the future, I would like to kind of figure out how we're going to implement that part of the project.
That would be great. And it's very helpful because we're seeing it in the context of this project, which I found really helpful. Okay, so we will schedule a Complete Green Streets checklist review, feedback and review. Go ahead, Robbie.
Okay. And yes, I was going to say, I think it would be helpful to have a separate discussion. It was a lot. I mean, we already had so many attachments for this meeting that, you know, when I got to this, I was like, wow, there's a lot there. I'm not sure I'm going to have actually time to read through the whole thing. So also my question now maybe I missed something, but since we're starting with Sheboygan Avenue and asking what we like about it, one of my questions was, you're removing parking, and I'm just curious. I think I have sort of a multi-part question, and maybe you can address this. I don't know exactly what the streets or roads or parking situation in Madison Yards is going to look like. So when you remove parking, let's say people are visiting their friends at some of the, you know, adjacent apartment buildings, where else could they park? So that's one question. And also, what's the utilization of the on-street parking now? I thought I saw for Seago, but I'm not sure I saw it for Sheboygan, but I could have missed it.
Yeah, so we do have some of that data. Just bring it up here. I think I have, just in case I got this question, I do have some. So I'll just read this out. So we did do, since the bulk of the parking that we're removing is between Whitney Way and Eau Claire, we are removing, so we did do a parking study there. High of 34 cars, average of 22 cars, low of 10 cars. And this was over, I think, a few days between, April 29th and May 4th. So we have, spaces being removed elsewhere on the project, 30, and then we're adding about 19 spaces on Seago.
Oh.
And Seago is we did a parking study on Seago too. I didn't put the results here, but it's quite underparked, especially on the west side. So we have some capacity there. Eau Claire, it also has parking, and Madison Yards will also be adding some parking that can be used for visitors on these streets. And I don't know about the parking garage situation for Madison Yards. There will be other options. In addition, we're adding, the BRT here and, and bike facilities, and that maybe should help mitigate people who are using the parking currently. It could free up some spaces on Eau Claire. So,
okay, I'm not advocating for keeping the parking. I just don't know what it's going to look like when Madison Yards is done. So is there going to be, you said you're removing most of the parking between Whitney and Eau Claire. Is there still parking between Eau Claire and Seago?
No, so all of the parking on Sheboygan will be removed.
Okay. I, for some reason, I thought that the counts that you did that were included in our packet were for Seago instead of Sheboygan. So
Okay.
Chris Petakowski, I saw your hand up. Did you have some comments?
Yeah, I thought I'd just mention real quick, and it might have been before Robbie came on the TC again. So when Madison Yards development agreement came through, Sean Malloy did a presentation, and that's kind of where that eastern cross section of Sheboygan was approved. So that was kind of set the stage for reducing the parking and creating that buffered bike lane. So I just wanted to remind folks that, that was already approved by the TC because we needed to know where to put that curb when Madison Yards did their development agreement. And then as far as parking within there, I do believe they have some ramps associated with their buildings. I'm not, there might be some on-street parking on some of their streets. I'm having a hard time remembering. I do know there is some structured parking for some of their users. So just wanted to add that to help with Robbie's question.
okay, I didn't want to sidetrack the conversation, but since we were talking about Sheboygan, I just wanted to kind of find out. And yes, I know there's structured parking because I've been watching the big ramp being built every time I go to Hilldale to go get my groceries.
Yeah. There was a significant conversation about buffered bike lanes versus parking. And it sounds like it'll be coming back to us again, Mario, for the actual decision with regard to the parking. So an important topic, Robbie, and one we'll likely hear more about. So go ahead, Mario.
Okay, so the questions about Sheboygan Avenue, are the loading zones appropriate? We have sort of loading zones like in the bike lane. They'll be clearly marked, and bikes will be able to kind of go into the buffer. The buffer's only 3 feet. So they might have to go into the traffic lane a little bit to pass the loading zones. There'll be 10-minute loading zones, but the bus loading zones, that some buses could be sitting there for a bit longer than that, perhaps. We don't really know. Would you like to see the bike lanes median protected? So similar to what we were doing for option B on Seago, in the surveys, they seem to gravitate towards that a little bit, providing more protection. There would be a lot of gaps for driveways and loading zones, but we could consider that option. And then I did want to highlight that, this option is contingent on the removal of the RP3 parking zones. Otherwise, we couldn't keep the bike lanes continuous through the whole street. So does anyone have any comments or questions?
Robbie, go ahead.
Well, I do have another question now. So you were talking about the loading zones being, the bike lanes being blocked. If they're median protected, would they still be blocked?
So we'd put gaps in place so that bikes could get around them. That would be a conversation where those two ideas might be in conflict, and that might preclude us from doing the median protection, because it might not be tenable. Like if somebody parks a little bit outside of the loading zone, could they block the bike lane? That kind of thing.
But the median, okay, because what I'm hearing from you is that there is no guarantee that you're actually going to have an unobstructed bike lane, and bikes are going to be forced to go around both buses and trucks, which means very low visibility, and forced out into moving traffic to get around those loading zones. Is that what I'm hearing?
That is what we're looking at here, unfortunately.
And the median would not preclude that from happening.
Correct.
Okay. But the median probably would keep them from moving freely out into the travel lane early so that they can just grab their space on the road.
Right, it would still provide protection in other areas. For example, by the BRT station, there was some concern that bikes or that the cars might see the BRT bus stop loading and use the bike lane to pass. So we'd want to put something in place to stop that.
Well, how wide would that bike lane be?
So the bike lane is it's 7 feet, but that's that's a gutter, and then 5-foot bike lane.
So, yeah, so
So
I mean,
then,
they'd have to pass in a 7-foot space.
well, but there's also, yeah, in that space, in that area, that it is 7 feet. So that is one thing I didn't mention, is that by the BRT station, there is no buffer. They widened it enough to keep the BRT station in there, but they didn't widen it enough to get a buffer in there between the bikes and the buses there. So
Well, I mean, given the information that I'm hearing, I don't think the median, I mean, usually I would say yes, definitely go with the median. But in this case, I don't think the median is going to provide any protection whatsoever. And so I'm not really certain that it's worth it to put it in. But that's my opinion. Maybe I'm not seeing the big picture here. So I'm curious what other people will say, and I'll put my hand down and shut up.
Yeah, no, we love to hear from you, Robbie. Darren, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I run under the mantra of paint is not infrastructure. And so I'm always looking for protected bike lanes, as much as possible. Here, I unfortunately just think it complicates things. And like Robbie, I don't know what ultimate benefit it would be with the gaps and such as explained. So especially with the loading zone. And I remember this was first came as one of my first meetings on TC. And there was a lot of discussion about the loading zone and people loading and unloading with accessibility issues going into the apartments. And so I'm just really just am leery about the protected bike lanes or a median bike lane right there on that stretch of road. So I think I would lean more towards, just as much as I cringe to say it, just the paint.
Okay, other comments with regard to that question in terms of median protected bike lanes? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands, so I'm assuming that people are. Pepe, did you have a comment?
Sorry, yes, I was still finishing a thought here.
Sure.
So I want to follow up on something that Robbie asked Mario. In the case the median was there in place, by the time we reach the rapid transit station where buses are going to be stopped, that median would still be there, or because you were saying like
we don't have enough room now, so it wouldn't be there. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah. Okay. Yeah, I just want to follow up on that, make that clear, because I mean, I overall, I generally agree with what Robbie was saying. In other cases, I would go hands down for median and protect it as much as we can. But especially in that case, if the median would have to disappear, and then we would kind of give the option to rushed drivers to go around buses anyway, it kind of defeats the purpose. So thank you.
Yeah, it's that seems to make sense. Anybody disagree or have any other comments with regard to seeing the bike lanes median protected? Okay. Go ahead, Mario.
All right. So next, I guess it's for Seago Road. It's a pretty simple, straightforwardly option A or option B. Which one do we think will be better?
Darren, go ahead.
I mean, I'm again going back to the protected bike lanes. I definitely go in favor of that. The question that I had in the layout and the road design, I saw that they were 12-foot travel lanes. Are we able to bring those in?
Yeah, so I think I started the design with 10-foot lanes or something, and then we started to go to meetings with, maintenance and started to bring in, stakeholders. And I think with, fire access and maintenance for snow removal, just having those two curves there means that, the plows are are 11 feet wide. And then, we need a little bit of wiggle room. So I think 12 feet, unfortunately, is what we have to go with for that lane width.
Okay, so we're going to give up pedestrian and cyclist safety for snowplows. I think, designing our cities around equipment and not around people is just a horrible way to go and flies in the face of complete green streets.
Renee does, but the 12-foot wide, Mario, that fits complete green streets, does it not?
It's currently, it reduces the road width by quite a bit. Currently it's 26 feet on each side. So we're reducing 26 to 12, reducing a lane of traffic. I would say overall it does fit. And yes, this is a community connector, I believe, which sort of need a little bit, we need a little bit of truck access, a little bit of, we need to make sure it's, it's a major route. So those were the considerations.
And Mario, there are, because it's curb protected, there's going to be a curb on each side because there's also a median.
Yes.
So it's a little bit of a different feel than a 12-foot lane with maybe some parking or something next to it. There is a curb on the median side.
Okay.
Correct, Mario?
Yes, but only at the intersections. So that's an important thing to note. So there will be, parking alongside that 12-foot lane, and that will be 8 feet wide. But at the intersections, it'll bump out to just have that 12-foot section.
Okay, Robbie, go ahead. Can't hear you. There you go.
Get back to my Zoom screen. I was looking at the slides.
Yeah.
So, okay, you said there's a curb on both sides, but you're asking about option A or option B. And option A, there's no physical protection. It's parking, 4-foot paint, bike lane, 4-foot paint, travel lane. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct. So yes, we were talking about option B when I was talking about that. We're not talking about option A. Yeah.
Option B is that basically the parking lane is the physical protection for the bike lane. There still aren't any additional curbs, right?
So there'll be a parking lane, and there will be I can go back to the cross section here. No worries. Yeah.
Slides that was throwing me off.
Yeah. So the drive lane's here, parking lane, and then there will be just a median there, and then the bike lane.
When you say a median,
it'll just be like two curbs and then concrete, 4 feet wide. Kind of like on University, there's that contraflow lane with there's a median next to it to protect it from traffic. It'll be like that. You are familiar. Renee, do you know any other examples in the city?
Yeah, our example really is University Avenue, but between the bike lane and the parking lane, it will be a concrete surface, similar to what's on University Avenue's contraflow lane, to protect the bike lane.
And it'll be 6-inch vertical curb, 6 inches like normal curb, and it'll just be concrete there.
Okay, does that answer your question, Robbie? Okay. Did we lose Robbie?
Oh no. Maybe. Well, while we figure that out.
Looks like she might have bopped out of Zoom.
Really?
Okay, Pepe, why don't you go ahead and maybe Robbie will come back.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we're talking about between A and B. I do have a question here, which is when you look at the at option A, Mario, you were saying when you were saying on the median in the middle, right? The curve would be only by the intersections. Is that the same for option E? But option A, sorry, option A looks like it's gonna have a curve all the way.
Yeah, so option A has no new medians. It's just the existing layout with these bump outs. So the road will bump out at the intersections, and then we'll have this configuration painted. But yeah, this is all option B. All this buffered curb stuff is all option B.
Well, I mean, I'm gonna add myself to Darren's motto. You know, in this case, I mean, I'm kind of inclined to option B. I really like the idea of having the median protecting the bike lane, especially because that 4-foot buffer that you were mentioning, kind of similar to what University Avenue has, but wider. It would essentially play the same role as a paint buffer when you open the door. So it's kind of helping out with doors opening from that parking lane. As long as that is happening and there's no risk of getting doored right in that bike lane. And also, as long as something you mentioned that is not reflected in this drawing, which is connections in between the two protected bike lanes, for example, coming from Vernon or Sawyer Street and wanting to turn left and getting to the bike lane. As long as we solve those connections, I would absolutely incline towards option B. I think it kind of makes sense. I see where Darren is coming from in terms of, you know, the risk of having that extra foot in the driving lane and how we have seen in the past, maybe in other cities and other places, how, you know, when you have a protected bike lane, the general mindset of the driver goes to, oh, there's so much protection now that I can actually drive faster. Even setting that aside, I think having the parking lane just next to the driving and on all those bump outs, that would definitely benefit pedestrians. I think that's a critical point here. If I focus on pedestrians, I would really incline towards option B because the distances to cross are way shorter. So yes, I mean, I guess as a summary, option B plus solving those connections in between when you do left turns. Do you think that's a possibility? Is there space for another drawing that addresses that?
Yeah, I think we have space on Vernon to do it, to put in the left turn accommodations for bikes. And that's something we've discussed. So it might be more complicated at Sawyer, and we'll discuss that when we get to it.
Okay, thanks, Pepe. Robbie, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. I am having internet issues and I dropped out. So
yeah.
I think I got my questions answered, but just to be clear, option B does have a curb between the bike lane and the parking lane.
Yes.
Okay. That's cool. So I'm definitely supporting option B. I think that Darren's concern about speeding, and maybe somebody mentioned this while I was off, but the concern with the 12-foot lane, people really have a tendency to shy away from parked cars. So that will probably slow people down right there if they have to drive next to a parked car. So it won't feel like a 12-foot lane. It'll feel like narrower. So I think that'll thank you.
Alder Martinez Rutherford, thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say I agree with that. And the bump outs also help a lot with that, reducing the speed when people are like, oh, there are cars there. Oh, there's a bump out. And then having that protected bike lane feels really important.
So you're voting for option B as well?
Yes.
Okay. Other comments? I happen to be a fan of option B myself. Any other thoughts from anybody else with regard to A or B? All I've heard is B so far. Anybody not agree with B? Anybody not agree with B? Why don't you raise your hand? Okay, sounds like B is the recommendation of the TC.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everyone. Okay, the next thing that kind of was brought up in our public meeting, some citizens, some residents of the area and the alder were discussing whether a left turn lane should be added at, Seago and Sawyer and Seago and Heathercrest. And then that is also tied to the idea of having a new traffic light, or whether we want an RRFB at Seago and Sawyer. So I think I kind of separated them out here, but they're kind of related. We didn't initially see any reason to put in left turn lanes or have a new traffic light at Seago and Sawyer. We were going to do an RRFB originally. This was something that was brought up in our public meetings, and we figured we should bring it up and ask for your input. So I will bring up those intersections so we can look at them. Hold on.
Sure. Before we talk about the traffic light, Tom Moore, are you still on? There's Tom.
Yes. Yep.
We have a whole process for looking at when it's appropriate to put in a traffic signal, don't we?
Yeah, so this is a unique intersection here. And Jerry Ship is also online. He's able to talk about this too, but this
is Jerry here?
This is currently an existing signalized intersection. It was installed in 1979, primarily for pedestrians to cross Seago Road. So the question here is...
Oh, I'm sorry. This is the memo you sent out to us, right?
Did you get that memo from?
Yes.
From
Yes, we
1979?
did.
Yeah,
Yep.
right. Yep. That's explaining the kind of the background at Seago and Sawyer.
Yep.
So the question is, what do we do with this now that we're reconstructing it? And obviously there weren't RRFBs in 1979. And part of the discussion was that the different assisted living resident buildings on either side of Seago Road and helping those residents cross. So the question is it better to use the signalized intersection? If we do that with the reconstruction, we're probably gonna have to do update things to make it work. We're not gonna be able to just rely on the existing infrastructure. If we went to an RFB, it would be taking out the existing signalized intersection and installing an RFB. And Jerry has the details of that, but that's kind of the main question here.
Sure, and I think the discussion will probably focus on what's safer, right? Darren, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I would jump right away to what's safer, and my experience says keeping the signalized intersection. I mean, drivers ignore the RFBs. I've seen it happen. I've had it happen in front of me, but they tend to really pay attention to a traffic light. And so, just for the pedestrian safety, I would say keep the light.
Okay, other comments with regard to that? Let me get up to where my hands are. We're okay. Denise, go ahead.
Thanks, Ann. Yeah, I would really, particularly in this area where there are a lot of elders and people with disabilities, people that just need longer time to cross, and also who, may really struggle to know, is that car really going to stop at the flashing beacon or is it not? So I think it would be hard for the folks who are used to that signalized intersection to see it go away. So yeah, I would lean towards keeping it signalized.
Yeah. Other comments with regard to that? It does seem safer based on what we've heard. Jerry?
Yeah, thank you. I think Tom gave a really good outline of the condition here and what's going on.
But one question I didn't really think about when earlier in the day when I spoke with Mario, but I do want to ask specifically of you, Denise, but anyone really is for this geometry, and we may be running into this more in the future as we reconstruct some streets with this protected bike facility. Is where should we be placing our accessible pedestrian buttons, and what do we consider the crosswalk? When we were in Denver at the NACTO conference, looking at protected intersections with other municipalities that have done that, they've all found different answers to this. The kind of the two options are: do you put the button on the outside of the bike lane and you treat the bike lane and the vehicle lane as the crosswalk, or do you put the button between the on the island before you cross the vehicle lane, so you're only treating the vehicle lane as the crosswalk, and bikes and pedestrians can generally interact without needing a signal? What we heard from NACTO guidance is that protected intersections, which this is not one, but there are some, I think, relevant similarities, is that the new trend for agencies that have already installed this are moving away from separating peds and bikes and just kind of merging them together, because there isn't a need to treat them separately. And I hope I've explained kind of the differences. It's just generally, should we treat bikes and cars as the conflict in the crosswalk, that when we show the walk, we want to stop both bikes and cars? Or do we say, no, bikes and pedestrians aren't typically in conflict, aren't the conflict we are very concerned about? We want to put that ped button a little bit closer to the vehicle pedestrian conflict.
Yeah. I know what I think, but I want to hear what everybody else has to think first. Darren, go ahead.
I just walked with some folks in La Crosse in an intersection just like this, and some folks who are visually impaired and walk with a cane, another with a dog. And it was confusing to them when it wasn't at where they were expecting it to be at the curb, and having to cross over there, and it was uncertain then of how to get across. So I would definitely defer to Denise, but I would lean towards having it, in a traditional spot at the curb before you cross over the bike path.
Thanks, Darren. Denise, go ahead.
Yeah, 100%. For the reasons Darren just named. Also, if bikes are tricky for particularly folks with vision impairment or hearing loss, because we might not hear or see them. And so if that signal treats both peds and cars the same, I really would like the bike to stop. And if it is over past the bike lane into where the traffic is, unless it's got a locator beacon on it, for beeping, I might not know where it is. It could be really confusing about how do I navigate this situation.
Thanks, Denise. Pepe, go ahead.
I think that of course, there will be cases, where treating people riding bikes and people walking would make sense. But I don't think this is the right intersection to do that. I absolutely agree with the two last persons speaking. I think it would make more sense for the reasons that they explained, that the buttons are placed in the place that people would expect them normally, in terms of the designs that you would most probably find in Madison. If we're kind of like not there yet, I think there is a future that we can accomplish where bikes and pedestrians are enjoying the same benefits in some ways, but I don't think this is the case.
Thanks, Pepe. I can just throw in, I wear a hearing aid and oftentimes I don't put it in when I'm out walking. And so as Denise pointed out, I don't always hear the bikes. And so I would be in favor of having the button before the bike lane, so that the bikes would be expected to stop and obey as well. So other comments, Alder Martinez Rutherford, go ahead.
Yeah, I am just curious if the bike lane will have a separate stop sign or stoplight so that the bikers are aware that they need to stop. Because I've seen that they don't always follow the rules of the road. So that is a concern for me. I'm just curious.
Oh, all the bikers here follow the rules of the road, I'm sure.
All of them, every single one.
Comments with regard to that in terms of how the bikers will know when they're supposed to stop?
Yeah, I think at this time that's kind of all still to be determined. It's going to depend. I mean, we originally weren't anticipating much signal work, and kind of the more this changes, the more likely we are now looking at like a reconstruction of the traffic signal. So like getting, just like you're saying, getting signal heads in the right position for the right users. It's not always the case with existing infrastructure. We might have to add or move some bases and stuff like that, but that could be something too that we're going to want to take a look at, just to make sure it's the signal heads are prominently placed in the right locations.
I guess even a sign that says bikes, you have to stop too.
Yeah, but I appreciate the feedback, because yeah, this is pretty new territory, I think, for us, and like I said, we've heard different stories, and it seems like there isn't really a consensus out there in the industry. So one city will say their advocacy group said do it this way, and another city will say do it that way. So just kind of I thought this would be a good opportunity to bring it up. And Denise, to your point about the locator button, that is one thing that we would do, is we would update this. Currently, half of the crossing chirps and the other half like makes a cuckoo sound. That's the old way we used to do these accessible pedestrian signals. We would update that to the ones with the locator tone, the tactile button, and all that.
Great. Double thumbs up from Denise. Okay, other comments on this particular topic? Did you have other questions then, Mario?
I guess the left turn one we haven't talked about, but
Pepe, was that the one you were talking about earlier about the left turn lane?
I am not sure. No, I think I talked about bicycles turning left. This is about
right.
It's different
left turn lane for cars, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. I did remember you talked about a left turn. Okay.
Yeah. So there were just for some background. There were some Sawyer Terrace is one way. There's a post office here, and I guess there had been a little bit of concern that folks would be backed up turning left here. I don't know if maybe Jerry can speak a little more to that. I don't know if the data backs that up, if whether that's something we need to do.
Yeah, so we don't have specific turning movements at this intersection, or at least not that I'm aware of. Maybe we do. I can take a look at that. Generally speaking, you look at streets with like 10,000 or less vehicles per day. Like Milwaukee Street's a really good example. We have about 10,000 vehicles per day on Milwaukee Street, and there are times when it gets busy and making a left turn gets a little hard, and maybe it backs up a few drivers. But otherwise, it operates pretty well at 10,000 vehicles per day as just a 2-lane street without any turn lanes. Volumes between like 10,000 to maybe up to about 18,000. like what they call twiddles, the two-way center left turn lane configuration, or in cases where you don't have a lot of driveways, just turn lanes at the intersections. That's kind of generally where that configuration tends to work well. So right now, it looks like we have about 75 to 9,000 vehicles per day, kind of almost 9,000 before COVID, and now our most recent count was around 7,500. And also, interestingly enough, in that memo in the 70s, there was also 9,000. So volumes here haven't changed over the last several decades.
Well,
but I just kind of like if we're doing a real quick look at the volumes and just do some educated guesses based on other experiences.
Yeah, it looks like Tom has his hand up too, Jerry. Maybe he can help out here.
Yeah.
I was just
Go
going
ahead,
to
Tom.
say that now that we have some direction to go with option B, this is something we can look further into. We can do some more observation out there, and
Yeah,
maybe
because
we don't need a
we wouldn't put one if we don't need it, right, Tom?
right, and it might be the option that we don't need a full left turn lane because people will pull into that meeting area, but maybe we need to create a little bit wider area where that 12-foot median is shown for through vehicles to get around left turning vehicles. That's something we can look into, though.
Okay. Okay, any other comments on that? Darren, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just in a talkative mood tonight, so sorry.
No
I just
problem.
noticed I mean, I know this road, I travel this road. I don't know that traffic volumes are ever that high to warrant it. And, you know, I'm thinking that even later on, if it does become a problem, you know, could we even just look at altering the timing of the signals to give, you know, the cars heading the one way on Sego to make a little bit lead time to get those off of there or something. But I just don't, my experience with traffic volumes there isn't that large.
Okay, very helpful. Other comments? Bill, go ahead.
I guess I'll just raise it, but this location wouldn't warrant signals today, new signals, based on just pedestrian count. And we've got other locations around the city that people have asked for pedestrian based on pedestrian crossings to put in traffic signals. So I don't have a problem with leaving it signalized, but you wouldn't meet warrants today if you were to put a new signal in.
Yeah, I think that is what we're talking about here, because it's going to be a new signal. So the old signal equipment's probably going to be removed.
Yeah. So are you going to do a warrant study? I don't think so. Right.
No, and you're right. This mostly, we did not do a warrant analysis here, but you're very familiar. Yeah, I'm very familiar with the signal warrant analysis warrants, and this. I would not expect this to come close to meeting signal warrant.
Yeah. That's why, you know, that I think we've called upon the RRPs to pick up that load where we can't meet the warrants and put that equipment in versus signals.
Yeah, and regarding operations too, and this can get into a whole other mess. But
yeah, we're getting kind of late here, so let's not.
I don't want to get into it, but we can look at left turn operations as the signal cabinet stands today. That's going to be pretty tricky, but yeah, that's something we can look into.
Okay, so we're looking at things today, and it sounds like we're going to need more information when we come back for parking, and we'll have another opportunity to look at this in the future. Is that correct? Or not?
So for parking, yes, and then if we make any large changes to any of the plans we're doing, we'll also come back.
Okay. So with Bill and Jerry's comment that this wouldn't qualify for a traffic signal, a new traffic signal today, does that change anybody's opinion on traffic signal versus RF versus the beacon, flashing beacon? Darren?
It doesn't me. As a matter of fact, it just kind of makes me even more committed that let's not get rid of the traffic signal for the benefit of pedestrians. There's a post office there and people are using that. So I wouldn't want to take it away.
Okay. So it sounds like people still believe we should leave the traffic signal there. Okay. Any other questions, Mario?
I think that about covers it. Thanks for everyone for staying late.
No, that's okay. It's very important for us to talk about. Renee, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention the RP3 parking that will be removed on Sheboygan. The reason we need to come back is that is in an ordinance that requires a public hearing. And so Stephanie and I talked, it made sense to decide that we're going to move forward, that there was support for that design that removes the parking. Then we would need to come back to meet the way the current ordinance is written to do the RP3. So that would just need to go onto the agenda so that we could go through the steps outlined in the ordinance.
When would that be, Renee, do you think?
Well, Stephanie and I had chatted that, I mean, maybe we would just do it in 2 weeks.
Okay. So the August 9th meeting?
I think tentatively, we could just talk over the steps and make sure that that works in the schedule, but that's the ordinance requirement.
And remind me, is that on Sheboygan?
That would be on Sheboygan that has the RP3 parking currently.
Yep, thank
that
you.
would be
Yep.
removed. Yep.
And I believe there is one area on Seago as well. So be careful, Renee. Make sure you get all the zones.
Yeah, I guess
when they do the request.
It's all area zone 20,
Yes.
but there might be a small portion that's changed as well on Seago,
Okay.
but primarily Sheboygan.
Okay, I'll throw something on our tracking for August 9th, and then if we need to move it, we can, Renee. Does that sound good? Okay, thank you.
That's great, thanks.
Okay, perfect. Okay, any other comments? And I didn't mean to hurry anybody along. I just want to make sure that, we cover all of our topics and that if it's going to come back to us, that we know that as well. Any additional comments? A lot of good, again, a lot of great discussion. Anything else? One last time? Okay. Thanks so much, Mario and everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. All right. So item 8 it's really just a discussion item. We made the decision to hold our meetings virtually because there are several members who have difficulty attending in person. But some members also expressed the desire to meet everybody in person because we haven't had that opportunity. So something the Board of Public Works did last year in August was they had a social gathering. It wasn't a meeting. There was no business discussed. It was just an opportunity to get together and say hey and get to know each other and have that opportunity. So I'm asking, are you interested in doing that? And if you are interested, are you interested? Thumbs up. I'm seeing lots of thumbs up, nodding heads. Okay, excellent. So then the question is, I would try and do something. Yang's not back, I don't think, till August 2nd or 3rd, Renee, something like that. Sometime in August or September, thinking about like maybe the Monona Terrace rooftop. Board of Public Works did it at the Memorial Union Terrace. Chris, go ahead.
I didn't mean to cut you off. That all sounds great. I was just going to add that some years back, we also sometimes did like a tour of city facility or something. I don't know if we want to double up on something like that, if that complicates things, but.
Oh, that's a great suggestion because of COVID, we sort of stopped doing tours. and stop doing some of those things. And with Metro in particular, there's a new facility. There, our new people who haven't had tours of Metro. So would people be interested in combining this with a tour? And Metro pops to mind because that's the one that people most enjoy having the tours of. I'm seeing thumbs up on those as well. So maybe combine with a Metro tour. Okay, I'll talk to Justin and Mick and those guys and see what we can do. That would be very efficient. Great suggestion. Excellent suggestion. Okay, so starting time, 5 o'clock is our normal start time. Anybody interested in starting a little bit earlier, like at 4:30? Because Aiden will have to do some doodle polls on available dates and things like that. So starting as early as 4, is that a possibility? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Thumbs up. Okay. All right. Okay. So we'll look at seeing if we can do it in conjunction with Metro Tour and get back to you with that. Does that sound like a good plan? I'm trying to keep it short. So, all right. Okay. Excellent. Great suggestion, Chris. I hadn't thought of that. So item 9, I don't really expect anybody to give any reports tonight unless Chris, you're a member of the Plan Commission. In the past, we had the Transportation Commission and the Transportation Policy and Planning Board. Well, we merged those together now into our recreated TC, but Chris is also a member of the Plan Commission. Harold Kleems was also just appointed to the Board of Public Works. Alder Harrington McKinney is also a member of the MPO Policy Board. Alder Govindarajan is also a member of the Sustainable Madison Committee. Robbie is up for appointment to the Joint Campus Area Committee. So we have members who are members of other transportation-related BCCs, or where there may be transportation issues that they might want to report back to. So the thought is to have this as a standard agenda item, may spend no more time on it tonight, but in the future, we may just say, anybody have anything? And people will say, nope, not tonight. Or there may be something that somebody wants to bring to our attention that has happened at one of the other committees. So this just seemed like a good way for us to try and see how that works. Chris?
So just for the sake of flagging something that might be of interest to folks, a theme at Plan Commission was basically sort of tweaking zoning code in response to TOD, the Transit Oriented Development Overlay. So some things have come up that like, oh, it doesn't work here or there, and sort of making those kinds of changes. So that might be of interest to folks.
Okay, like with regard to parks and things like that? Yeah.
Certain.
Yeah, I get the.
Certain. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Great. So does this seem like a good way to keep everybody informed? Brief comments? Okay, we'll try it. If it doesn't work, we'll ditch it. Sound like a plan? Okay. Item 10, the land subdivision regulations passed the council, yes, last night. Yay. There were some minor modifications, amendments, but none of those impacted Complete Green Streets. So with that change, the Complete Green Streets has been implemented. So that was really good news. And I think I mentioned earlier, Harold Kleems filled our last vacancy on the Transportation Commission. So we are now fully staffed, if you will. So any other announcements that anybody has? No? Okay. In terms of future agenda items, got a couple Public Works transportation projects, Acacia Ridge, Portage Road, Metro Transit Development Plan update. I'm going to talk to you about TC Work Plan Handbook and website, TC Practices of Equity and Inclusion, forming an ad hoc TC subcommittee on TC accessibility. We just had removing parking on Sheboygan and Seago, that public hearing. We're going to have Renee's discussion with regard to the Complete Green Streets project checklist, and that's just for the next August meeting. And then we've got Amtrak alternatives, crossing guard policy. I have that on there twice. Metro's audit, John Nolan Drive update, Safe Streets Madison, quarterly traffic safety review. So those are all coming up over the course of the next month or so. Anything else that I didn't name that anybody wants to see on a future agenda? Bill?
I was happy to see, I drove on Seago the other day, and I was happy to see the city is studying the removal of the traffic signal at Seago and Regent Street. So it actually made the paper, so in letters to the editor. But I guess if there's any movement of looking at other locations around the city where we can remove traffic signals.
Looks like we lost Tom and Jerry. So
it's nothing urgent, but it might be something to talk with Yang about. So, but I know that study is going on right now. So,
which intersection was that?
Seago and Regent.
Thank you.
They're going to convert that to a four-way stop.
Okay. All right, I'll bring that up. Okay, thanks. Anybody have anything else? Okay, thanks for hanging with us for such a long time tonight. We do need a motion to adjourn. Alder Martinez Rutherford and Robbie, we have a motion and a second, and I have yet had anybody object to us adjourning. Again, thanks for hanging with us for this long. We had a lot of great conversation and a lot of great feedback. And Steve, are we going to see you again at another meeting or not?
We'll see how it goes, but this might be the last one.
Okay, so I just want to take this opportunity to thank Steve Brist. He's been very helpful to us as our assistant city attorney. So virtual round of applause for Steve, and good best in your retirement, Steve.
Did you meet Eric Finch before I got on board here?
We did. We introduced him and his daughter Rosie at the Rosie, right, Eric? Oh, he's off screen, so he might be there.
Okay.
But we met his daughter too. So
okay, great.
Yeah. So thanks so much, Steve. Just wanted to recognize you, and thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay. And we'll assume that everybody votes in favor of adjourning, and thanks everybody. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Chair.